She heard every word, every insult in flawless Korean, every cruel joke, every illegal detail he thought she couldn't understand. The arrogant businessman sitting at table 12 had no idea the stupid waitress he was humiliating spoke 7 languages, or that his careless boasting had just given her ammunition that could destroy him. But when Lena finally opened her mouth to respond, she never expected what would happen next. One sentence would shatter his world. The next would nearly destroy hers. This is the story of how silence became her weapon and her curse. Before we begin, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's dive in. The kitchen doors swung open with their usual violence, releasing a cloud of steam and garlic that hung in the air like expensive cologne. Lena Hart barely flinched as she balanced 3 plates of pan-seared halibut along her left arm, a trick she'd perfected after 2 years at Meridian, Chicago's second most pretentious restaurant. The most pretentious was across the street, but they didn't tip as well. Table 7 needs water, Marcus hissed as he brushed past her, his bow tie askew. And 12 just sat down. They look loaded. Lena nodded without breaking stride. Her feet ached in the required black heels, and there was a coffee stain on her white blouse from this morning's rush that she'd tried unsuccessfully to hide under her vest. She delivered the halibut to table 4, a couple celebrating an anniversary they clearly weren't happy about, and received the usual grunt of acknowledgement. Rich people never said thank you. She'd noticed that her first week. The dining room at Meridian was all dark wood and soft lighting, the kind of place where entrees started at $60 and people wore watches worth more than her entire year's rent. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across white tablecloths. A pianist in the corner played something classical and forgettable. Everything designed to whisper, "You've made it. You belong here." Lena didn't belong here, not as a guest anyway. She grabbed a water pitcher from the service station and headed toward table 7, catching her reflection in one of the massive gilt mirrors that lined the walls. 28 years old, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide anymore. Hair pulled back in a bun so tight it gave her headaches. She looked tired. She looked poor. She looked exactly like what she was. Someone barely holding on. Table 7 got their water. Table 9 needed more bread. Table 3 wanted to speak to the manager about the temperature of their soup, as if soup temperature was some kind of human rights violation. "Of course, I'll get him right away," Lena said, with the smile she'd practiced in the mirror. Polite, helpful, completely devoid of personality. She'd learned that smile at Northwestern, actually, during her linguistics program, before everything fell apart, back when she was Dr. Hart's brilliant protege. The girl who could switch between Mandarin and Arabic mid-sentence, who'd published a paper on Korean dialect variations at 23, back when she had a future that didn't involve wiping down tables and swallowing her pride for minimum wage plus tips. But that was before Mom got sick, before the hospital bills started piling up like snow in January, before the diagnosis, before Danny. Her little brother's face flashed through her mind. 12 years old, too thin, too pale, hooked up to machines in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The doctor said it was treatable, said the odds were good with the right protocol. They just needed money. Lots of it. Insurance covered some. Her maxed-out credit cards covered more. The rest came from places she tried not to think about. Payday loans, borrowed money from her advisor that she'd never be able to pay back, and 60-hour weeks at Meridian where men like the ones at table 3 complained about soup temperature while her brother fought for his life. "Lena, table 12, Marcus said again, jerking his head toward the corner booth. She looked up. 3 men had settled into the restaurant's premier table, the one with views of the Chicago River, where the city lights reflected off the water like scattered diamonds. They were young, probably early 30s, dressed in suits that cost more than her car. The one in the middle was the one you'd notice first. Tall, sharp features, hairstyled with the kind of precision that required a professional and probably cost $100. He sat with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been told no, never been made to wait, never been anything less than the most important person in any room he entered. Victor Hahn. She'd heard the hostess whisper his name. "Big tech investor," Marcus had muttered. "Made some app that sold for stupid money. Tips like crap, apparently, but management loves him." Lena approached the table with her water pitcher and her professional smile. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Meridian. Can I start you off with something to drink? The two men on either side glanced at her briefly. The one in the middle, Victor, didn't even look up from his phone. Whiskey, one of them said. Whatever's top shelf. Macallan 25 if you have it, the other added. Of course. And for you, sir? She directed this at Victor. He still didn't look up. 5 seconds passed. 10. The silence stretched uncomfortable and awkward. His companions shifted in their seats. Lena stood there, pitcher in hand, smile frozen, waiting. Finally, he glanced up. His eyes swept over her with all the interest one might give to a piece of furniture. Water's fine, he said flatly, then returned to his phone. She poured the water, started to explain the specials. We'll look at the menu, Victor interrupted without looking up. Come back in 10 minutes. Not a request, a dismissal. Lena felt the familiar burn in her chest, the one she'd gotten good at swallowing. She nodded, turned away, and made it exactly 3 steps before she heard him start talking. In Korean. Her feet almost stopped. Almost. But she'd learned better than that. Instead, she kept walking at the same measured pace, her expression unchanged, while her mind shifted gears with the practiced ease of a multilingual who'd spent years training her brain to dance between languages. Isigdang sobisu ongmangine. The service at this place is a mess. Victor's voice carried the particular dialect of Seoul's Gangnam district, educated, expensive, dripping with the kind of contempt that came from inherited wealth. His accent was good, but not native. American-raised probably, with language lessons at some private academy. 와 여기 왔어요? 이 음식도 그냥 그런데. Why did we even come here? The food's mediocre at best, one of his companions replied. Lena reached the service station, punched in their drink order. Her hands were steady. 비즈니스 때문이지. 저 투자자들이 여기 좋아한다더라. 비즈니스, 도주 investors like this place, Victor said. 별로 중요한 거래는 아니고 그냥 돈 좀 뜯어낼 생각. Not that important of a deal anyway. Just planning to squeeze them for some money. She'd studied Korean for 4 years at Northwestern, spent a semester in Busan, written her thesis partially on the sociolinguistic variations between North and South Korean dialect patterns. She understood every single word, and she said nothing, because that was the game. The survival strategy she'd learned working in places like this. When rich people spoke in foreign languages around the staff, they weren't just being rude, they were creating space to be honest, to say things they'd never say if they thought you could understand. Smart servers played dumb, kept their heads down, kept their jobs. Lena returned with the whiskeys balanced on a tray. Macallan 25 for you, sir. And for you. She placed the crystal glasses down carefully. Have you had a chance to look at the menu? 자예 명청에 보이네. 대학도 안 나왔을 거. She looks stupid. Probably didn't even go to college, Victor said, looking right at her while speaking Korean to his friend. 이리온 deseo 평생 일하는 거지 뭐. This is probably all she'll ever do. The words hit like small caliber bullets. Not fatal, but they left marks. She kept her smile. Actually, we'd like to hear the specials again, Victor said in English, leaning back in his chair. Slowly this time, use small words. One of his companions snorted into his whiskey. Lena recited the specials, slowly, using small words. Her voice never wavered. 이 정도면 이해할까? 원숭이 훈련시키는 기분이네. Think she got that? I feel like I'm training a monkey, Victor said. She finished the specials, waited. We'll need a few more minutes, he said in English, waving her away. Back at the service station, Lena's hands were shaking, just slightly, just enough that she had to grip the edge of the counter until it passed. You okay? Marcus appeared beside her, refilling his own water pitcher. Fine. Table 12 being assholes? They're fine. Lena. He knew her too well. Don't let them get to you. They're all the same. Come in here, flash their money, treat us like we're invisible. But you know what? Their money spends the same as everyone else's. Just smile, get the tip, and forget they exist. Easy advice, harder practice. She wanted to tell Marcus what they were saying, Wanted to explain that she understood every insult, every casual cruelty. But what would be the point? It wouldn't change anything. Would only make her feel worse. The night dragged on. Table 12 ordered appetizers. Amagiona, Jiega, Ihaina, Haryona. Whatever, let's see if she even understands the menu, and entrees and another round of drinks. Victor continued his running commentary in Korean, assuming the safety of linguistic invisibility. He talked about the business deal he was manipulating, about the investors he was planning to mislead, about the offshore accounts where he was hiding money. And Lena heard everything. She brought their food, cleared their plates, refilled their water glasses, all while Victor Han dismantled his own credibility in a language he assumed she couldn't speak. It was almost 10 o'clock when things shifted. 재미있는 거 하나 할까? Want to do something fun, Victor said, and something in his tone made Lena's instincts prickle with warning. She was at table 9, taking a dessert order, but her attention had already split. Half focused on the elderly couple in front of her who couldn't decide between the creme brulee and the chocolate torte. Half tuned to the conversation happening 3 tables away. One day? What? One of his friends asked. 저 웨이터리서 좀 걸려볼까? 한국말로 주문하는 거야. Let's mess with that waitress. I'll order in Korean. Her stomach dropped. 완전 복잡하게. 제가 당황하는 거 보면 재밌겠다. Make it really complicated. It'll be hilarious watching her panic. The elderly couple finally decided on the torte. Lena wrote it down with mechanical precision and headed back toward the kitchen, her mind racing. This was different. This wasn't just casual mockery. This was targeted humiliation. She could already see how it would play out. Victor would order something complex in Korean, probably using restaurant slang and regional dialect that even many Korean speakers would struggle with. She was supposed to stand there, confused and embarrassed, while he and his friends laughed. Then she'd have to apologize, admit she didn't understand, get the manager involved. The whole thing would be a performance designed to reinforce the hierarchy. Rich customer on top, stupid waitress on the bottom. And the worst part was, she couldn't do anything about it. If she revealed she spoke Korean, she'd be admitting she'd heard everything, all the illegal business dealings, all the insults, all the private conversation. People like Victor Han didn't take kindly to being spied on, even accidentally, even if she was just doing her job. She could lose her job, could get blacklisted, could end up unemployed in a job market that already treated her Northwestern linguistics degree like toilet paper. And Danny needed his treatments, needed them desperately. Order up table 4. The chef's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. She grabbed the plates, delivered them, smiled, moved mechanically through the motions of her job while her mind worked through the angles, searching for a way out of the trap that was about to spring. There wasn't one. When she approached table 12 again, Victor was ready. 자, 시작하자. All right, let's do this, he said to his companions. Then he looked up at Lena with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We're ready to order. Of course, sir. She pulled out her notepad, and Victor Han started speaking. 나는 메밀국수를 먹고 싶은데 면은 강원도 스타일로 손으로 뽑은 거로 준비해 주시고 육수는 사골이랑 닭을 12시간 이상 끓인 거여야 해요. 거기다가 김치는 묵은지로 적어도 3년은 발효시킨 걸로 주세요. 고명으로는 수육을 얹어 주시되 돼지고기는 제주 흑돼지여야 하고 삶을 때 통마늘하고 생강을 넣어서 I want buckwheat noodles, but the noodles need to be hand-pulled gangwon-do style, and the broth should be made from beef bones and chicken simmered for at least 12 hours. The kimchi needs to be aged, at least 3 years fermented. For the garnish, add boiled pork, but it has to be Jeju black pork, and when you boil it, include whole garlic and ginger. He went on and on, specifying cooking methods that didn't exist on Meridian's menu, using regional terminology, throwing in slang, describing a dish that was part Korean comfort food, part impossible fever dream. His companions were grinning. One had his phone out, probably recording. Lena stood there, pen hovering over her notepad, face carefully arranged in polite confusion. She let him finish. Let the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. I'm so sorry, sir, she said slowly. I didn't catch all of that. Could you maybe point to something on the menu? Victor's smile widened. 역시 몰라. 뭐라는지 하나도 모르니. Told you, she has no idea what I'm saying. Is there a problem? His English was perfectly patronizing. No, sir. We have a wonderful selection of entrees, and I'd be happy to help you. This Geo Ocean Dalro Geolga. 제가 내 주문 따라 할 수 있을까? Should I bet $5,000 that she can't repeat my order? Lena's pen had stopped moving. $5,000. He was turning this into a game with stakes. 미치었어. Are you crazy? One of his friends said, but he was laughing. 재밌잖아. 보자. 지혜가 내 주문 완벽하게 반복하면 내가 5,000불 준다. 못하면 지혜가 나한테 일주일 동안 공짜로 일하는 거지. It's fun. Look, if she can repeat my order perfectly, I'll give her $5,000. If she can't, she works for me free for a week. He said this all in Korean. Every word. Making a bet about her, with her standing right there as if she were a piece of furniture. An object in a game. The rage that bloomed in Lena's chest was white-hot and familiar. She'd felt it when her mom died with $80,000 in medical debt. When Northwestern told her they couldn't hold her fellowship position. When Danny's doctor explained the treatment protocol that insurance wouldn't cover. But rage was expensive. Rage didn't pay bills, so she swallowed it. Again. Sir, I really think it would be easier if you just ordered from the menu, she tried one more time. Victor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. 에올마나 게올릴가? 지혜가 포기하는데? How long do you think before she gives up? That's when Lena noticed the other table. Table 15. Corner position, partially obscured by a decorative screen. An elderly Korean man sat alone, distinguished looking in a simple but expensive suit. He'd been there for about an hour, she realized. Quiet. Reading something on a tablet and watching. His eyes met hers for just a second. There was something in his expression, not pity, not sympathy, but recognition, understanding. He'd heard everything too. The realization hit her like cold water. Someone else knew. Someone else understood exactly what was happening. It should have made her feel better. Instead, it made everything worse. Because now there was a witness to her humiliation. Miss? Victor's voice was sharp. Are you going to take our order or just stand there? Her throat was tight. I'll get the manager, sir. 도망간. She's running away. She wasn't running. She was surviving. Lena turned toward the kitchen, her vision slightly blurred, her professional composure cracking at the edges. She'd made it maybe 5 steps when she heard Victor say something that stopped her cold. 아무튼 오늘 밤 거래는 완벽하게 처리됐어. 그 회계 서류는 K맨 계좌로 다 넘겼고 FDA 담당자도 매수했으니까 승인은 문제 없을 거야. 완전 불법이지만 누가 알겠어? Anyway, tonight's deal went perfectly. I transferred all the accounting documents to the Cayman account, and we've bribed the FDA contact, so approval won't be a problem. Completely illegal, but who's going to know? Lena's feet stopped moving. She stood there in the middle of Meridian's dining room, the soft piano music playing, the clink of silverware on china, the murmur of wealthy conversations, and processed what she'd just heard. FDA bribery, offshore accounts, illegal business dealings. He'd just confessed to a federal crime, multiple crimes. Assuming no one could understand him. Her mind was racing now, working through scenarios, calculating risks and possibilities. If she reported this, it would open investigations. But she'd have to admit she spoke Korean, have to admit she'd been listening. And Victor Han was clearly the kind of man who had lawyers, good ones, the kind who could make her life very difficult. But if she didn't report it, why'd she stop? One of Victor's companions said. Lena started walking again, reached the kitchen, found Marcus. I need 5 minutes, she said quietly. What's wrong? Just 5 minutes. Can you cover my tables? He must have seen something in her face because he didn't argue, just nodded. She went to the employee bathroom, a cramped single stall that smelled like bleach and desperation, locked the door, leaned against it. Her hands were shaking again. This time she couldn't stop them. Danny's face flashed through her mind. Not the current version, pale and thin in a hospital bed, but the one from before. Bright-eyed, laughing, believing in his big sister who spoke 7 languages and was going to change the world. What would he think if he could see her now, hiding in a bathroom, swallowing insults, pretending to be stupid because it was safer than being smart? Her phone buzzed. A text from Danny's nurse. "Treatment went well today. He's asking about you." The tears came then, fast and hot and completely inappropriate for someone who was supposed to return to work in 3 minutes. She'd given up everything for him. Her career, her dignity, her future, and she'd do it again without hesitation. But there were moments, like this one, when the weight of it all felt crushing. Someone knocked on the door. "You good in there?" "1 minute," Lena called back, her voice steadier than she felt. She wiped her eyes, fixed her makeup as best she could, looked at herself in the mirror. The same tired face looked back, the same dark circles, the same expression of someone who'd learned to make herself small and invisible. But underneath, something else flickered. Something she'd pushed down for 2 years. The person who'd stood in front of a room full of professors and defended her thesis in 3 languages, who'd won the Linguistic Society of America's Graduate Student Award, who'd been brilliant and ambitious and certain she was going to matter. That person was still in there somewhere, buried, but not dead. Lena took a breath. Then another. Then she opened the bathroom door and stepped back into Meridian. Table 12 was still there. Victor was on his phone again, laughing about something. His companions were looking at the dessert menu. She approached the table. "Sir, I apologize for the delay. If you're ready to order, a jigdo iseyosne." "Oh, you're still here," Victor said in Korean without looking up. Then switching to English, "Yeah, we'll just have 3 of whatever chocolate thing you've got, and the check." "Of course." She wrote it down. "Guna Jonah 오늘 밤 완전 재미없었네. 저 웨이터리 수기로 피는 거 말고는." "This whole evening was boring except for messing with that waitress," Victor said to his companions as she walked away. Lena brought them chocolate torte, brought them the check, watched as Victor pulled out a black Amex card without even looking at the total, $847.50 before tip. He signed the receipt, left a $40 tip on nearly $900, less than 5%. "Gaja, sigan nang biya, yogi." "Let's go. This place is a waste of time," Victor said, standing up. They were leaving. The whole encounter was ending. She'd survived it. And then Victor's phone rang. "Jamganman." "Hold on," he said to his companions, answering. "Yoboseo?" "Hello?" He walked a few steps away from the table, having a conversation in rapid Korean. Business, by the sound of it. Something about stocks and timing and market manipulation. His companions started gathering their things. One of them shrugged on his coat. And then it happened. Victor set his phone down on the table, still active, still on the call, and reached into his jacket pocket for something. While he was distracted, while his hand was in his pocket, Lena saw him pull out something else along with his phone charger. A watch. Expensive looking. Gold. He glanced at it, seemed to realize he'd pulled it out by accident, and in the split second before he could put it back, his eyes found Lena's. There was a moment, barely a heartbeat, where their gazes locked, where she saw the calculation happen in his expression. And then he did something she didn't expect. He dropped the watch. Not accidentally, deliberately. Let it fall from his hand onto the booth seat. Then he picked up his phone, ended his call, and grabbed his coat. "Gaja. Let's go." The 3 men walked toward the exit. Lena stood frozen, staring at the gold watch sitting on the leather booth seat. Understanding too slow, realization too late. "Hey!" The voice came from the hostess stand. "Hey!" Lena turned. Victor was pointing at her. The hostess was looking confused. Marcus had emerged from the kitchen. And then Lena understood. "She stole my watch," Victor said clearly, loudly, in English. "I set it down when I was on the phone, and now she has it." The restaurant went quiet. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward their corner. "What?" Lena's voice came out strangled. "My watch, it's a Patek Philippe, worth $85,000. I set it on the table and now it's gone, and she's the only one who was near enough to take it." This was happening. This was actually happening. "Sir, I never..." She couldn't form words. Marcus was already moving toward table 12. He looked at the booth seat, looked at Lena. His expression changed because the watch wasn't on the seat anymore. Lena realized with creeping horror that Victor must have palmed it, Must have picked it up while she was distracted. Must have. Check her pockets, Victor demanded. Call the police. I want her arrested. This is ridiculous, Lena said, but her voice shook. I didn't take anything. The manager appeared. Gerald Morrison, 50-something, balding, more concerned with the restaurant's reputation than with any individual employee's dignity. Miss Hart, perhaps we should step into the back. No. She was backing away now. No, I'm not going anywhere. I didn't take his watch. Then you won't mind being searched, Victor said calmly. And there it was. The trap. Perfectly sprung. If she refused, she looked guilty. If she agreed, they'd search her and... Her hands went to her vest pocket, the one she'd put her phone in. Her fingers touched metal. Cold. Smooth. Definitely not her phone. The watch was in her pocket. He'd planted it on her. Somehow, when she'd brought the check or the dessert, or one of the 100 times she'd been near the table, he'd slipped it into her pocket. The color drained from her face. Victor saw it. Smiled. Check her pockets, he said again. This was it. This was the moment where everything fell apart, where she got arrested for theft she didn't commit, where she lost her job, her credibility, any chance of ever working again. Where Danny's treatment stopped because she couldn't make bail, couldn't afford a lawyer, couldn't... Stop. The voice came from behind her, calm, authoritative, accented with the distinctive tones of someone who'd learned English as a second language but had perfected it over decades. Lena turned. The elderly Korean man from table 15 was standing. He was shorter than she'd thought, maybe 5'7", but he carried himself with the kind of presence that made height irrelevant. His suit, she realized now, was bespoke. His watch, visible on his wrist, made Victor's alleged $85,000 timepiece look like a toy. I saw everything, the man said simply. The room held its breath. He walked forward slowly, his eyes never leaving Victor Han. When he spoke again, it was in Korean. Perfect, unaccented, native Korean. 당신이 시계를 그 여자 주머니에 넣는 걸 봤습니다. I saw you put the watch in her pocket. Victor's face went white. 그리고 오늘 밤 당신이 한 모든 말도 들었습니다. FDA 뇌물, Cayman 계좌, 시장 조작, 모든 것을. And I heard everything you said tonight. FDA bribes, Cayman accounts, market manipulation, all of it. The elderly man pulled out his phone, tapped the screen. A recording started playing, Victor's voice, clear and damning, confessing to federal crimes in Korean. 제 이름은 박우라연입니다. 혹시 들어보셨을 수도 있겠네요. My name is Orion Park. Perhaps you've heard of me. Victor's face went from white to gray. Even Lena recognized the name. Orion Park, CEO of Park Industries, one of the largest conglomerates in South Korea. Real estate, technology, manufacturing. A man with the kind of power that made people like Victor Han look like small-time operators. Security footage, Mr. Park said, switching to English for the benefit of everyone else in the restaurant. I have already contacted building security. They will confirm that this man planted his watch on Miss Hart approximately 4 minutes ago when she brought the dessert. They will also confirm that he never removed it from his wrist before that moment. He turned to the manager. I suggest you do not call the police to arrest your employee. I suggest instead that you call them to arrest this man for attempted fraud, false accusation, and based on what I recorded tonight, several federal crimes that the FBI will be very interested to hear about. Gerald Morrison looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. Marcus was staring. The hostess had her hand over her mouth. And Lena couldn't breathe. She pulled the watch from her pocket with shaking hands. It gleamed under the chandelier light, beautiful and damning. I didn't, she started. I know, Mr. Park said gently. Everyone knows. Or they will momentarily. He gestured to the manager. The footage, please. And then I think we should all have a conversation about what happens next. Victor tried to run, actually bolted for the door. But Meridian's security guard, a former cop named Tommy, who usually just checked IDs, blocked the exit with surprising speed. Easy there, buddy, Tommy said. Let's wait for the real police, yeah? It was chaos after that. Sirens, Actual police. Security footage played on someone's laptop showing Victor clear as day dropping his watch into Lena's pocket while she was distracted by his companion asking about the dessert menu. Throughout all of it, Lena sat in a chair by the hostess stand, her entire body shaking, unable to process what was happening. Mr. Park sat down beside her. Didn't say anything at first, just sat there quietly while the police took statements, while Victor Hahn was read his rights, while her entire world turned inside out. "You speak Korean," he finally said. Not a question. "Yes." "How many languages?" "7. 8 if you count ancient Greek, but that's not conversational." He smiled slightly. "Northwestern University. Dr. Catherine Hart's student. I read your thesis on dialect variation. It was excellent." She looked at him. "You... what?" "I try to keep up with linguistic research. It's relevant to my business, international contracts, cultural negotiation, translation accuracy. Your work was impressive." "Was," Lena said bitterly. "Past tense. Why did you stop?" And there it was, the question she'd been avoiding for 2 years. "My mother got cancer," she said quietly. "Then my brother. The leukemia. I had to... There wasn't a choice. I had to work. Had to help. Research doesn't pay bills." "Mister." Park nodded slowly. "And so you took a job where you pretended to be less intelligent than you are, where you let men like Victor Hahn insult you in languages they assumed you couldn't understand, where you made yourself invisible. Survival isn't always dignified." "No," he agreed, "but it's always worthy of respect." He stood up, pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. "My company has operations in 47 countries. We need translators, cultural consultants, people who can navigate linguistic complexity. We especially need people who are brilliant, resilient, and capable of maintaining composure under pressure." He paused. "You demonstrated all 3 tonight." Lena stared at the card. Embossed letters, heavy stock. "Contact information for Park Industries' Chicago office." "I don't understand." "I'm offering you a job, Miss Hart. One that uses your actual skills, one that pays considerably more than waitressing, one that includes comprehensive medical benefits that would cover your brother's treatments." The words didn't make sense. Nothing about tonight made sense. "Why?" she whispered. Mr. Park looked at her for a long moment. "Because I was you once, long time ago. Different circumstances, same desperation. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. I'm paying that forward." The police were finishing up. Victor Hahn was in handcuffs, still trying to talk his way out of the situation. His companions had already given statements and fled. Gerald Morrison approached nervously. "Miss Hart, I want to apologize for... I should have trusted..." "You're fired," Mr. Park said calmly. Morrison blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I own this building. I own Meridian through a subsidiary corporation. And as of this moment, you no longer work here." He turned to Lena. "You'll need to train your replacement. I'm thinking Marcus would be suitable. He seems loyal." Marcus, who'd been hovering nearby, looked like he'd been hit with a brick. "Wait, what?" he managed. The night spiraled into even stranger territory after that. Statements to police, confirmation from security, a quiet conversation between Mr. Park and someone on his phone that ended with Victor Hahn's assets being frozen pending investigation. Through it all, Lena sat with Mr. Park's business card in her hand, her mind struggling to catch up with reality. At some point around midnight, after the police had left and the restaurant had closed and the cleaning crew was wiping down tables, Mr. Park's driver pulled up outside. "Come," he said to Lena, "I'll give you a ride home." She should have said no, should have been suspicious, but she was too tired to argue, too overwhelmed to think straight. The car was a Mercedes, black, immaculate. They drove through Chicago's late-night streets in silence for several minutes before Mr. Park spoke. "The job offer is genuine, but there's something you should know." Lena's stomach tightened. Here it came, the catch, the hidden price. "Your brother's treatment. I made some calls while we were waiting for the police. Park Industries has partnerships with several research hospitals. Danny, that's his name, yes, will be transferred to Northwestern Memorial tomorrow. Best oncology team in the Midwest. All expenses covered. She couldn't speak, literally couldn't form words. He'll be in good hands, Mr. Park continued. Better than good. The treatment protocol they'll use has a 94% success rate for his type of leukemia. I can't, her voice cracked. I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to pay me back. I'm investing in your potential. Very different things. The car pulled up outside her apartment building, a rundown complex in a neighborhood where she could afford rent on a waitress's salary. Monday morning, Mr. Park said. 9 a.m. My office. We'll discuss details then. For now, go get some sleep. Call the hospital. Talk to your brother. Tell him things are going to get better. Lena got out of the car in a daze. The Mercedes pulled away, leaving her standing on the sidewalk in her stained uniform, Victor Hahn's watch still somehow in her pocket, a business card clutched in her hand that might change everything. She looked up at her apartment window, second floor, corner unit. The lights were off because she couldn't afford to leave them on while she was at work. For the first time in 2 years, Lena Hart let herself believe that maybe, survival could eventually turn into something more. She went inside, called the hospital. The night nurse sounded confused but confirmed that yes, there had been some calls about Danny's transfer, and yes, someone from Northwestern Memorial would be in touch tomorrow. Lena's hands were still shaking when she hung up. She sat on her couch, a second-hand thing with springs that poked through, and let the tears come. Not the bitter ones from earlier, different ones, complicated ones that tasted like relief and disbelief and fragile hope all mixed together. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Holy shit, did that really just happen? She smiled despite everything. Yeah, I think it did. You're going to take the job, right? I don't know. It seems too good to be true. Lena. Take the goddamn job. You deserve this. Did she? She wasn't sure. Wasn't sure of anything except that tonight had fractured something fundamental about how she understood the world. Outside her window, Chicago hummed with late-night traffic. Somewhere in the city, Victor Hahn was probably calling lawyers. Somewhere else, Mr. Orion Park was probably already back to running his empire. And in a hospital room across town, Danny was sleeping, unaware that his life was about to change. Lena looked down at the business card again, traced the embossed letters with her finger. She'd spent 2 years making herself invisible, speaking languages she pretended not to know, accepting disrespect because survival required it, building walls between who she was and who she had to pretend to be. Tonight those walls had shattered, and she had no idea what came next. But for the first time in a very long time, Lena Hart allowed herself to imagine a future where she didn't have to hide, where her intelligence was an asset instead of a liability, where the languages in her head could be spoken out loud. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was maybe, possibly, incredibly real. She fell asleep on her couch, still wearing her uniform, still clutching the business card, still trying to believe that sometimes, in the middle of your worst moment, the universe remembers you exist and decides to care. The business card sat on Lena's kitchen counter for 3 days before she touched it again. Heavy stock paper, embossed lettering that caught the light when she finally picked it up Sunday morning. Park Industries. Orion Park, Chief Executive Officer. A Chicago address in the loop. A phone number. An email that probably went straight to an assistant who screened everything. She'd Googled him, of course. Spent 2 hours Friday night going down rabbit holes of news articles and corporate profiles. Park Industries had operations in 47 countries, like he'd said. Real estate development, technology investments, manufacturing, even a pharmaceutical division. Revenue in the billions. Mr. Park himself was worth enough that Forbes bothered tracking it. The kind of wealth that made Victor Hahn look like he was playing with Monopoly money. What didn't make sense was why someone like that had been eating alone at Meridian on a Wednesday night. Why he'd intervened. Why he'd offered her a job instead of just being a good Samaritan and walking away. You overthinking again? Danny's voice came from the doorway. He looked better this morning, some color back in his cheeks. The new treatment protocol Northwestern Memorial had started was already showing results. I'm always overthinking. It's kind of my thing. You gonna call him? I don't know. Lena. Danny shuffled into the kitchen, still moving carefully like his bones hurt. They probably did. That guy basically saved your life. And he said he'd pay for my treatment. You have to at least call. It feels like a trap. Everything feels like a trap to you now. He wasn't wrong. Maybe some things are just good luck. Maybe the universe decided to stop kicking us for 5 minutes. The universe didn't work that way. Lena had learned that lesson thoroughly over the past 2 years. Good things came with price tags, spoken or unspoken. Rich men didn't hand out jobs and medical coverage to struggling waitresses without expecting something in return. But Danny was looking at her with hope in his eyes, and the hospital had already called twice about transferring him to Northwestern Memorial, and her bank account had exactly $247 in it, and the rent was due in 8 days. She picked up her phone and dialed before she could talk herself out of it. The assistant who answered was polite and efficient. "Mr. Park's office, this is Jennifer speaking." "Hi, this is Lena Hart. Mr. Park gave me his card and said to call about a potential position." "Oh yes, Miss Hart. Mr. Park's been expecting your call. Can you come in tomorrow morning, 9 a.m.? That fast. No interview scheduling, no screening questions, just an appointment like it had already been decided. "Tomorrow works," Lena heard herself say. "Perfect. I'll email you the building security information and parking details. The office is on the 43rd floor. Dress as business casual." After she hung up, Lena stared at her phone for a long moment. Danny was grinning. "See? Not a trap. Just a job. We don't know that yet. You're impossible to make happy. You know that? Maybe. Or maybe she'd just learned that happiness was expensive and usually came with installment payments she couldn't afford. The Park Industries building was all glass and steel, the kind of architecture designed to make you feel small. Lena stood on the sidewalk Monday morning in her only suit, bought for her thesis defense 4 years ago, slightly too big now because she'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose, and tried to convince herself she belonged here. The security in the lobby checked her ID, gave her a visitor badge, and directed her to a bank of elevators that moved so smoothly she barely felt the ascent. 43 floors passed in silence, broken only by soft classical music she didn't recognize. The office was exactly what she'd expected. Minimalist furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, art that probably cost more than her student loans. Jennifer, mid-30s, perfectly styled, greeted her with a smile that seemed genuine. "Mister, Park will be just a few more minutes. Can I get you coffee? Water?" "Water's fine, thank you." She sat in a chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent and tried not to fidget. Through the glass walls of Mr. Park's office, she could see him on a phone call, gesturing as he spoke in what sounded like Korean. He looked different here than he had at Meridian. Not kinder or harsher, just more himself. Like the restaurant had been the costume, and this was the real version. The call ended. Mr. Park waved her in. "Miss Hart, thank you for coming." He shook her hand, gestured to a chair across from his desk. "I trust Danny's transfer went smoothly?" "They moved him Friday. The new doctor seems really good." "Dr. Reeves is the best pediatric oncologist in the Midwest. Your brother's in excellent hands." He settled into his own chair, studied her for a moment. "You look skeptical." "I look grateful." "You look like someone waiting for the other shoe to drop." He wasn't wrong. "Let me save you some anxiety. There's no other shoe. I offered you a job because I think you'd be an asset to my company. The medical coverage is part of our standard benefits package. There's no hidden agenda. People don't usually help strangers like this. I'm not helping a stranger. I'm hiring someone with a master's degree in linguistics from a top university, someone who speaks 7 languages fluently, someone who demonstrated exceptional composure under pressure, and someone who clearly understands the politics of communication in ways most people never learn." He pulled a folder from his desk drawer. "This is the position I have in mind. Cultural linguistics consultant. You'd work with our international expansion teams, helping navigate language barriers and cultural considerations in business negotiations." He slid the folder across the desk. Lena opened it with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. The salary made her stomach drop. $127,000, plus benefits, plus performance bonuses. "This is too much," she said quietly. "It's market rate for someone with your qualifications. I've been out of the field for 2 years. I'm rusty. Then you'll get unrusty. Look, Miss Hart, Lena, I can tell you don't trust this. I understand why. The world has taught you to be suspicious of good fortune. But I'm not offering this because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering it because it serves my interest to have someone with your skills on my team." What if I fail? Then you fail and we figure out what to do next. But I don't think you will. He leaned back in his chair. I read your thesis on Korean dialect variations. It was published in the Journal of Linguistic Anthropology, yes? She nodded, surprised he knew that. It was excellent work. Rigorous, insightful, the kind of research that takes real talent. He paused. You didn't stop being brilliant when you stopped being an academic. You just stopped having opportunities to use that brilliance. I'm offering you that opportunity again. Lena looked down at the contract. The salary. The benefits description that included family medical coverage with no exclusions for pre-existing conditions. The job description that sounded like something she'd dreamed about back when dreams still seemed possible. Can I think about it? Of course, take the week. Talk to Danny. Talk to anyone you trust. But Lena? He waited until she met his eyes. Sometimes the right choice is the one that scares you, not because it's dangerous, but because it means believing you deserve good things. She left the building in a daze, the contract folder clutched against her chest like a shield, rode the train back to her neighborhood in silence, while her mind spun through scenarios and possibilities, and all the ways this could still turn into disaster. By the time she got to the hospital, she'd almost convinced herself to turn it down. Too good to be true. Had to be a trap. Nobody just gave people their lives back. Then she walked into Danny's new room at Northwestern Memorial. It was bigger than his old one, brighter. The machines were newer, quieter. Danny was sitting up in bed working on homework that his teacher had sent over, looking more alert than he had in months. Dr. Reeves was there, reviewing charts with a nurse, and when she saw Lena, she smiled. Your brother's labs came back. The markers we were worried about? Already improving. I think we caught this at exactly the right time. Something in Lena's chest cracked open. Not broke, opened. Like a door she'd kept locked for so long she'd forgotten there was a room behind it. That's good, she managed. That's really good. After Dr. Reeves left, Danny set aside his homework. So, how'd the meeting go? He offered me the job. And it's too good to be true. Stop it! Danny's voice was sharp in a way it rarely got. Just stop. You think you don't deserve good things because everything's been garbage for 2 years. But maybe we're due for some good things. Maybe we earned them by not giving up. Danny, take the job, Lena, please. I'm getting better. You're getting a chance to use your actual brain again instead of memorizing dinner specials. And maybe we can stop drowning for 5 seconds. Just take the job. He was 12 years old and lecturing her about hope. 12 years old and braver than she'd been in months. Okay, she said. Okay, I'll take it. She called Mr. Park that afternoon, accepted the position, and spent the next 3 days in a state of quiet panic about everything she'd just committed to. Jennifer sent over a mountain of paperwork, employment contracts, non-disclosure agreements, benefits enrollment, tax forms. Lena filled them out in Danny's hospital room while he slept, her hand cramping from signing her name over and over. Her start date was the following Monday. She had exactly 5 days to figure out how to be a professional consultant after 2 years of being invisible. Marcus took her shopping on Saturday. Insisted on it, actually, showed up at her apartment and dragged her to an outlet mall where they found 3 business-appropriate outfits that didn't completely drain her credit card. You look like a person with a real job, he said approvingly as she tried on a blazer. I had a real job. Meridian doesn't count. That place was a nightmare dressed up as fine dining. It paid my bills. Barely. And it was killing you. Marcus pulled another blazer off the rack, considered it, put it back. You're allowed to be excited about this, you know. You're allowed to think maybe things are turning around. I don't know how to do that anymore. Then fake it till you figure it out. That's what everyone else does. They got coffee afterwards, sat in the food court while teenagers swarmed around them and Muzak played overhead. Marcus was talking about culinary school applications, about finally pursuing the career he actually wanted instead of just surviving. He'd saved enough for the first semester, he said, was going to make it work somehow. You inspired me, he said. Watching you stand up to that asshole. Watching Mr. Park hand you a second chance and you actually taking it made me think maybe I don't have to just accept that my life is serving other people's food forever. I didn't stand up to anyone. I just spoke Korean. You did more than that. You existed as yourself for the first time in 2 years. That's not nothing. Maybe he was right. Or maybe Lena was just too tired to argue. Monday morning arrived with the kind of anxiety that made her nauseous. She dressed in one of her new outfits, spent too long on makeup trying to hide the exhaustion that lived in her face now, and took the train downtown with her heart hammering against her ribs. The first day was overwhelming in ways she hadn't anticipated. Jennifer walked her through orientation, introduced her to what felt like 50 people whose names immediately evaporated from her brain. Her office was small but real. Actual walls, a door that closed, a window with a view of the river. She had business cards being printed with her name and title, had a computer login and email signature, and a benefits package that included dental. The actual work seemed to involve a lot of meetings, sitting in conference rooms while executives discussed expansion strategies for markets in Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. Occasionally, someone would turn to her and ask about cultural considerations or translation nuances, and she'd answer with the part of her brain that had been dormant for 2 years, dusting off knowledge she'd assumed she'd never use again. It was exhausting, exhilarating, terrifying. "You did well today," Mr. Park said at the end of her first week. He'd stopped by her office unannounced, which she was learning was his style. "The Singapore team was impressed with your analysis of the government contract language. I just pointed out what the Mandarin version implied that the English version didn't." "Exactly. You saved us from agreeing to terms we didn't fully understand. That's valuable." After he left, Lena sat at her desk and stared at her computer screen until the words blurred. She'd forgotten what it felt like to use her actual skills, to have her intelligence be an asset instead of something to hide. The feeling was strange and uncomfortable, like wearing shoes that fit perfectly after years of ones that pinched. Her phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. "Danny's asking when you're coming by." She'd missed visiting hours 2 days this week because of late meetings. The guilt sat heavy in her stomach. "On my way," she texted back. Danny was watching something on the hospital TV when she arrived, some animated show she didn't recognize. He muted it when she walked in. "You look tired." "Thanks. You look like a 12-year-old watching cartoons." "It's anime, there's a difference." He paused. "How's the job?" "Good. Hard. I keep waiting for someone to realize they made a mistake hiring me. That's called imposter syndrome. I read about it." At her surprised look, he added, "I'm in the hospital, not dead. I still have internet." "When did you get so smart?" "Always been smart. You just never noticed because you were too busy keeping us alive." The observation hurt because it was true. She'd been so focused on survival that she'd stopped seeing Danny as a person instead of just a responsibility. Stopped noticing that he was growing up, getting smarter, developing opinions about things. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For not being here as much, for being so stressed all the time that I forgot to just be your sister." Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You kept me alive. That's what mattered. Everything else we can figure out later." They watched anime together until visiting hours ended. Something about teenagers with supernatural powers fighting monsters. Danny explained the plot in enthusiastic detail, while Lena only half followed but appreciated the enthusiasm. Walking out of the hospital that night, she felt the weight of the past 2 years pressing down. The constant stress. The fear. The way she'd had to split herself in half. One version for work where she stayed silent and invisible. Another version for Danny where she pretended everything was fine. Maybe now she could start putting those pieces back together. Start being whole instead of fragmented. The thought was both hopeful and exhausting. Her second week at Park Industries was when she met the executive team properly. A Monday morning meeting in the main conference room, everyone dressed in suits that cost more than her entire wardrobe combined. Mr. Park introduced her as their new cultural linguistics consultant, and she could feel the skepticism in the room like humidity. David Chen was the worst. Head of International Expansion, early 40s, Stanford MBA. He looked at Lena like she was a diversity hire, someone brought in to check boxes rather than contribute substance. "So you speak Korean," he said during a break. Not a question, an assessment. "Among other languages, yes." "And you think that qualifies you to consult on multi-million-dollar negotiations?" The old Lena, the Meridian version, would have backed down, apologized, made herself smaller. The new version, still finding her footing but trying, said, I think understanding what people actually mean versus what they say they mean is crucial in any negotiation, especially across cultures where directness is considered rude. But if you'd prefer to continue misreading contract language and leaving money on the table, I'm happy to stay in my office. David's eyebrows went up. Behind him, another executive, a woman named Sarah, was trying not to smile. Fair enough, David said slowly. Show me what you've got. So she did. Spent the next hour walking through the Singapore contract they were negotiating, pointing out places where the Mandarin and English versions diverged in meaning, where pending review in English was actually negotiable with considerations in Mandarin, where standard terms really meant we're open to counteroffers if you know to ask. By the end, David was taking notes. Sarah was nodding. Mr. Park was sitting at the head of the table looking satisfied. This is exactly why I hired her, he said simply. After the meeting, Sarah caught up with Lena in the hallway. That was impressive. David doesn't back down easily. I got lucky. You got prepared. There's a difference. Sarah was in her late 30s, dressed in a way that suggested both competence and zero patience for nonsense. He's going to test you more, just so you know. He does it with everyone new, especially women. Especially women he thinks got hired because Park likes them rather than because they're qualified. Did he do it with you? For 6 months, until I restructured a deal he'd written off as dead and saved the company $40 million. Then he shut up. She smiled. You'll be fine. You've got the skills. Just don't let him make you doubt that. The testing came in the form of impossible deadlines and complicated assignments. David would drop a contract on her desk at 4 p.m. and ask for a full cultural analysis by morning, would schedule calls with international partners and forget to include her until the last minute, would question her assessments in front of other executives. Lena handled it by being better than he expected, every time. The analysis would be on his desk by 7 a.m., thorough and insightful. She'd join the calls anyway and contribute value. She'd defend her assessments with data and examples until his objections looked petty. After 3 weeks, he stopped testing and started actually listening. You're good at this, he admitted one Friday afternoon. They were in her office reviewing a proposal for Eastern European expansion. Better than I thought you'd be. Because you thought I was a diversity hire? Because everyone Park brings in personally is usually someone he's trying to save rather than someone who can actually do the work. You're the first one who's been both. It wasn't exactly a compliment, but it felt like progress. At home, or what passed for home now, split between her apartment and Danny's hospital room, life was starting to stabilize in ways that felt fragile and temporary. Danny's treatment was working. His latest scans showed the leukemia in retreat. Dr. Reeves was cautiously optimistic, which in doctor speak meant things were going as well as they could hope. Lena had paid off her most urgent debts with her first paycheck. The second one went toward catching up on rent and buying groceries that weren't ramen or day-old bread. The third one made her cry because she had money left over after bills, and she couldn't remember the last time that had happened. We should celebrate, Marcus said when she told him. They were having coffee at their usual spot near the hospital. He had news too. Got accepted to Le Cordon Bleu's night program. Was going to keep working while going to school. Celebrate how? I don't know. Normal people stuff. Dinner somewhere nice. Maybe somewhere that's not a hospital cafeteria or your depressing apartment. My apartment isn't depressing. Your apartment has a stain on the ceiling that looks like a crime scene, and the heat only works when it feels like it. It's depressing. He wasn't wrong. Lena had been meaning to look for somewhere better, but hadn't had the time or energy. The thought of moving, of packing up their life again, felt overwhelming when everything else was still so unstable. After Danny gets out, she said, when he's home and healthy, then we'll celebrate. Deal, but I'm picking the restaurant and you're not allowed to check the prices before ordering. That night, sitting in Danny's hospital room while he slept, Lena pulled out her phone and did something she'd been avoiding. Searched for Victor Hahn. The trial was scheduled for early next month. The charges had multiplied as investigators dug deeper. Fraud, conspiracy, bribery, money laundering. His assets were frozen. His business partners had all publicly distanced themselves. The news articles called him a disgraced tech investor, an accused fraudster. She should have felt satisfaction, vindication, some sense that justice was being served. Instead, she mostly felt tired, and grateful that Mr. Park had intervened before Victor's trap could destroy her completely, and aware that there were probably hundreds of people like her, maybe thousands, who'd encountered men like Victor and hadn't been lucky enough to have someone witness it, someone powerful enough to make it right. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Park. Good work on the Czech Republic analysis. The team was impressed. She stared at the text for a long moment. 3 months ago, she'd been crying in a restaurant bathroom, convinced her life was over. Now she was getting praise from a CEO about international business analysis. The change was dizzying, disorienting. She kept waiting to wake up and find out it had all been a desperate dream conjured by her exhausted brain. But Danny was getting better. The job was real. The paycheck had cleared. Maybe some changes, however unlikely, were just changes. Not miracles or dreams or traps. Just life finally deciding to stop kicking and start offering possibilities instead. She texted back, "Thank you." Then she set her phone down, pulled her laptop out, and started reviewing the materials for Monday's meeting on the Eastern European project. Because whatever else was true, she'd meant what she said to David. She was going to be so good at this job that no one could question whether she deserved to be here, not even herself. The Eastern European project consumed the next 6 weeks of Lena's life in ways she hadn't anticipated. What had started as a straightforward expansion proposal into Czech manufacturing had morphed into a complex negotiation involving 3 governments, 2 multinational corporations, and enough political landmines to keep her up at night reading briefing documents until her eyes burned. David had handed her the lead on cultural consultation, which meant she was suddenly responsible for making sure Park Industries didn't accidentally insult anyone or miss crucial subtext in communications that crossed 4 different languages. The pressure was constant and exhausting, and exactly what she needed to stop thinking about Victor Hahn's upcoming trial. "You're going to burn out," Sarah said one Thursday afternoon. They were in the conference room reviewing contract drafts, surrounded by empty coffee cups, and the kind of fatigue that came from too many 14-hour days. "I've seen it happen. Smart people who think they have something to prove work themselves to death trying to prove it. I'm fine. You're falling asleep in meetings. David noticed yesterday." That stung. Lena had thought she'd hidden it better. "I'm just tired. Danny had a rough night and I stayed at the hospital later than planned." "How is he?" "Better? The treatment's working, but he has bad days still. Nights where the pain gets worse or he can't sleep or he just needs me there." Sarah was quiet for a moment, studying her with an expression Lena couldn't quite read. Then she said, "You know you can ask for accommodations, right? Flexible schedule, work-from-home options. Park's not a monster. He'd understand." "I don't want special treatment." "It's not special treatment. It's basic human consideration for someone dealing with a family medical crisis." She paused. "Why are you so determined to prove you can handle everything perfectly? Who are you trying to convince?" The question hit harder than it should have. Lena looked down at the contract in front of her, the Czech legal terminology swimming together into incomprehensible shapes. "Everyone who thought I didn't deserve this job," she said finally. "Everyone who assumes I'm here because Park felt sorry for me. Everyone who's waiting for me to fail so they can say they knew I couldn't handle it." "And yourself?" "What?" "You're trying to convince yourself that you're not the person who was crying in a restaurant bathroom 2 months ago, that you're not someone who barely survived, that you're worthy of being here." Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "I get it. I really do. But you can't prove your worth by working yourself to death. That's just another kind of disappearing." After Sarah left, Lena sat alone in the conference room and let the words settle. Another kind of disappearing. She'd spent 2 years making herself invisible at Meridian because survival required it. Was she doing the same thing now, just with different methods? Working so hard that she became nothing but her productivity, her usefulness, her value to the company? Her phone buzzed. "Danny's nurse. He's asking for you. Not urgent, but he misses you." Lena looked at the stack of contracts still needing review. Looked at her watch. 6:47 p.m. Looked at the Chicago skyline going dark outside the windows. She gathered her things and left. Danny was playing a video game when she arrived, some racing thing with graphics that made her eyes hurt. He paused it when she walked in, his face lighting up in a way that made the guilt of the past week's absences hurt worse. "You're early." "Relatively speaking." She dropped into the chair beside his bed. "How you feeling?" Okay. Tired. Dr. Reeves says my counts are good, though. Says if they stay stable, I might be able to go home next month. Really? Outpatient treatment. Still have to come back for checkups and stuff, but I could sleep in my own bed, watch TV without hospital smell everywhere. He paused. We still have the apartment, right? You didn't give it up? The question caught her off guard. Of course we still have it. Why would you think, I don't know, everything changed so fast? New job, new hospital, you're gone all the time now. Thought maybe you moved or something and forgot to mention it. The accusation in his voice was subtle, but there. Lena felt it like a cut. I wouldn't move without telling you, and I'm sorry I've been gone so much. Work's been intense. Is it the trial thing? With that asshole from the restaurant? She'd tried to shield him from the details, but Danny wasn't stupid. He'd overheard enough phone calls with the prosecutors to piece it together. Partly, but mostly just work. Big project, lots of responsibility. You like it though, right? The job? Did she? Lena had to actually think about it. The work itself was fascinating, untangling linguistic nuance, navigating cultural complexity, using skills she'd thought were dead. But the pressure was immense. The imposter syndrome was constant. The fear of failing was exhausting. I like using my brain again, she said finally. Like feeling like I'm good at something besides memorizing dinner specials and staying invisible. You were always good at things. You just forgot because everything was terrible. Out of the mouths of 12-year-olds. Danny unpaused his game, went back to racing cartoon cars around impossible tracks. Lena watched him play and tried to remember when she'd last felt uncomplicated joy like that. Before Mom got sick, probably. Before the world taught her that happiness was expensive and usually temporary. She stayed until Danny fell asleep, then took the train home through Chicago's late-night quiet. The apartment was exactly as depressing as Marcus had described. Cold because the heat was broken again, stale because she hadn't been there enough to air it out, lonely in ways that had nothing to do with the actual space. She'd meant to review contracts. Instead, she fell asleep on the couch, still in her work clothes, too exhausted to make it to the bedroom. The weekend before Victor's trial, Mr. Park called her into his office. The prosecutors want you to testify, he said without preamble. They called me this morning asking if you'd be willing. Lena's stomach dropped. Testify about what? What you heard that night, the Korean conversations, the business dealings he discussed. They're building their case around the recording I made, but your testimony would add credibility. Show that there was a witness who understood everything in real time. I don't want to do that. I told them as much, but they're insistent. Say your perspective as the victim of his attempt to frame you is crucial. Victim. The word felt wrong. Lena had survived, hadn't she? Had come out the other side with a better job and a future. Victims were people who stayed broken, people who couldn't move past what had happened to them. What if I say no? They'll subpoena you. You'd have to testify anyway, just without preparation. Mr. Park leaned back in his chair, studying her. I know you want to move past this. Pretend that night at Meridian was just an isolated incident that's over now. But Victor Hahn hurt you, tried to destroy you for entertainment. You have the right to ensure he faces consequences. You already ensured that. Your recording, the security footage, that's enough. Is it? Or are you just afraid of facing him in court? The question made her angry, which was probably the point. I'm not afraid of Victor Hahn. Then what are you afraid of? Standing up in a courtroom and admitting how powerless she'd been, how close she'd come to losing everything, how easily she'd been dismissed and humiliated and nearly destroyed by someone who saw her as entertainment. I'm afraid of being defined by that night, she said quietly, of being that waitress who got set up instead of someone who's good at her job and has value beyond being a victim in someone else's crime story. Mr. Park was quiet for a long moment. You think testifying makes you a victim? Doesn't it? I think it makes you a person who refuses to stay silent when silence protects the guilty. That's not being a victim. That's being brave. Brave. Another word that felt wrong. Brave people made choices. Lena had just survived long enough for someone else to save her. But she agreed to testify anyway because saying no would mean the prosecutors subpoenaed her and she'd have even less control over the narrative. At least this way she could prepare. Could work with them on what questions to expect. could try to maintain some dignity in a process designed to strip it away. The prosecutor assigned to her testimony was a woman named Janet Reese, late 40s, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too many cases and developed zero tolerance for manipulation. She met with Lena twice before the trial, walking her through what to expect, how to handle cross-examination, what the defense would try to use against her. "They're going to paint you as desperate," Janet said during their second meeting. "Someone who had motive to lie, to exaggerate, to turn a misunderstanding into a criminal case because you were struggling financially and saw an opportunity." "That's not what happened." "I know, you know, but Victor Hahn's lawyer is very good at making juries doubt what they know, so we need to be better." They practiced. Questions and answers. How to stay calm when the defense implied she was lying. How to stick to facts without editorializing. How to be credible without being emotional. Human without being weak. It felt like learning to be invisible all over again, just in a different way. The trial started on a Monday in late April. Chicago was struggling into spring, the kind of weather that couldn't decide between winter's cold and summer's warmth. Lena wore one of her new suits and heels that made her feet hurt and sat in the courtroom trying not to fidget while the prosecution laid out their case. Victor looked smaller than she remembered, thinner. His expensive suit didn't fit quite right anymore, like he'd lost weight in lockup awaiting trial. His lawyers surrounded him like armor, whispering strategies and objections, creating a buffer between him and consequences. When his eyes found hers across the courtroom, there was nothing in them but calculation. No remorse, no recognition of what he'd done, just cold assessment of how much damage her testimony might cause. Lena looked away first, hated herself for it, then reminded herself that this wasn't about winning staring contests. This was about making sure he couldn't do to someone else what he'd tried to do to her. The prosecution spent 2 days building their case, security footage showing Victor planting the watch, Mr. Park's recording capturing the Korean conversations, played for a jury that needed translation to understand but could hear the arrogance in Victor's tone, even without comprehension. Financial experts explaining the offshore accounts. FDA investigators discussing the ongoing bribery probe. By the time Lena was called to testify on Wednesday morning, Victor's lawyers looked worried, which meant they were going to come at her hard. She'd already described this in part 1, but living it was different than watching it happen later. The walk to the witness stand felt endless. The oath to tell the truth felt heavy. And Janet Reese's questions were designed to paint Lena as sympathetic, hardworking sister, sacrificing everything for family, educated woman forced into service work by circumstance, innocent victim of Victor's cruel game. It was all true. It was also reductive and embarrassing and made her sound helpless. The cross-examination was worse. Victor's lawyer, a man named Dennison with silver hair and a voice like expensive scotch, came at her with surgical precision, asked about her academic failures, her financial desperation, her motive to turn a simple misunderstanding into a federal case, implied she'd heard the Korean conversations wrong or exaggerated them, or possibly made them up entirely to support her case against a man she had reason to resent. "Isn't it true, Miss Hart, that you were fired from Meridian that night?" "I was falsely accused of theft and terminated, yes. And isn't it true that you blamed my client for that termination?" "Your client planted evidence on me and accused me of a crime I didn't commit. So yes, I blamed him, because he was responsible." "But you only have your word and Mr. Park's recording to support that claim, correct? And security footage, and the testimony of multiple witnesses, and your client's own recorded confession to multiple federal crimes." Dennison didn't like that. His expression tightened. "Miss Hart, you speak 7 languages, you claim?" "Yes." "Including Korean, which you studied at Northwestern University?" "Correct." "And yet you chose to work as a waitress at a restaurant where Korean business people frequently dined. Doesn't that strike you as convenient?" Janet objected. The judge sustained it, but the implication hung in the air, that Lena had deliberately positioned herself to eavesdrop on private conversations. "I worked at Meridian because it was the job I could get that paid enough to support my brother's medical treatment," Lena said before Dennison could ask another question. "I didn't choose my tables. I didn't choose which customers spoke which languages. I just did my job and tried to survive." "And when you heard my client speaking Korean, you understood every word?" "Yes. Every nuance, every idiom, every piece of slang. Yes, Korean is one of my strongest languages. I spent a semester in Busan researching dialect variation. I wrote my thesis partly on sociolinguistic patterns in Korean business communication. I understood everything your client said, or thought you understood. Language is complex, Miss Hart, easy to misinterpret, especially under stress. I didn't misinterpret anything. Your client called me stupid, compared me to a monkey, discussed bribing federal officials, and admitted to multiple crimes because he assumed I couldn't understand him. Those aren't misinterpretations, those are facts. The jury was watching her now, really watching. Lena could feel their attention like heat. Dennison tried a few more angles, suggesting she was coached by Mr. Park, implying she had motive to exaggerate for revenge, questioning whether her translation was accurate. But Janet objected to most of it, and the judge shut down the rest. By the time Lena stepped down from the witness stand, she felt hollowed out, used up, like she'd been turned inside out for a jury to examine and judge. Mr. Park was waiting in the hallway. "You did well," he said. "I felt like I was on trial." "In a way you were. The defense's entire strategy relies on making you seem unreliable. But you didn't give them anything to work with. You were clear, consistent, credible." "I don't feel credible. I feel exhausted." "That's what testifying does. Takes everything you have and leaves you empty." He paused. "Go home. Take the rest of the week off. The jury deliberates tomorrow. You've done your part." But Lena couldn't go home. Couldn't face her empty apartment or the hospital room where Danny would ask how it went, and she'd have to explain without falling apart. Instead, she walked through downtown Chicago, along the river, past buildings where people worked normal jobs that didn't require them to dissect their trauma for public consumption. She ended up at the coffee shop where she and Marcus usually met. He wasn't there, was in class at culinary school, but she sat in their usual booth anyway and ordered something expensive she didn't taste. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Heard you testified. You okay?" "No," Lena typed back, then deleted it. Typed, "Managing. That's not the same as okay. Want company?" Sarah showed up 20 minutes later with her own coffee and the kind of presence that made Lena grateful she'd said yes. They didn't talk about the trial, talked instead about Sarah's daughter's dance recital, about the Eastern European project timeline, about the Cubs' terrible season so far. Normal conversation, normal topics. The kind of thing normal people discussed when their lives weren't consumed by testifying against men who'd tried to destroy them. "Thank you," Lena said eventually. "For what?" "For not asking how I'm doing or making me talk about the trial. You'll talk about it when you're ready, or you won't. Either way is fine." Sarah stirred her coffee absently. "I testified in a harassment case once, years ago, different company. Guy who thought touching his female employees was acceptable behavior. The trial made me feel like I was the one who'd done something wrong, like I was being punished for speaking up. Did it get easier? Eventually. Took time, though. Took realizing that telling the truth doesn't make you a victim, it makes you a witness. You're not defined by what happened to you, you're defined by what you do with it." The words settled into Lena's chest like stones in a river, solid, grounding, permanent. That night, Danny asked about the trial. Lena told him the truth, that it was hard, that she'd survived it, that they'd know the verdict soon. "You think they'll find him guilty?" Danny asked. "I don't know. I hope so." "What if they don't?" The question Lena had been avoiding. "Then he walks free and we move on anyway. We don't let him have power over our lives anymore." Danny nodded, went back to his video game, but Lena could tell he was worried. Could see it in the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking. "Hey," she said, "whatever happens with the trial, we're okay. We have the apartment, I have the job, you're getting better. Victor Hahn doesn't get to take that away from us." Promise? Promise. It was a promise she hoped she could keep. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Lena spent that time in her office at Park Industries, pretending to work on the check contracts while refreshing her phone every 30 seconds, waiting for news. When the text came from Janet Reese, Lena's hands were shaking too hard to read it properly. Had to read it 3 times before the words made sense. Guilty. All counts. She sat very still for a moment. Then she started crying. Not the bitter tears from Meridian's bathroom or the desperate ones from hospital waiting rooms, but something different. Something that felt like release. Her office door open. Mr. Park stood there, his own phone in hand. "You heard," he said. "All counts?" "All 14. Fraud, attempted theft by deception, perjury, conspiracy to commit bribery, money laundering. The judge is talking 15 to 20 years minimum." 15 to 20 years. Victor Hahn would be in his 50s before he got out, would lose his business, his reputation, his freedom, would face the kind of consequences that men like him usually bought their way out of. "I should feel happy," Lena said. "Should you?" Justice was served. The bad guy lost. Isn't that how it's supposed to work? Sometimes justice just feels like exhaustion with a different label. Mr. Park sat down in the chair across from her desk. "You're allowed to feel whatever you feel. Relief, satisfaction, anger, nothing at all. There's no correct emotional response to watching someone who tried to destroy you face consequences. I just feel tired. Then rest. Take tomorrow off. Process this however you need to." But Lena didn't take the day off. Came to work Thursday morning because sitting alone with her thoughts sounded worse than drowning in contract analysis. Buried herself in this Eastern European project, in translation work, in anything that kept her mind occupied. By Friday afternoon, David was looking at her with something approaching concern. "You're being weird," he said bluntly. "I'm being productive." "You rewrote the same section of the check contract 3 times. That's not productive, that's obsessive." He paused. "Look, I know the trial ended. I know the verdict came back guilty. And I know you're probably dealing with complicated feelings about that. But you're allowed to take a break. The contracts will still be here Monday." "I don't want to take a break." "Why not?" "Because stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant processing. Processing meant admitting that the past 2 months, the trial, the testimony, watching Victor get convicted, hadn't magically fixed anything. She still woke up at 3 a.m. worrying about money, still felt like an imposter at work, still carried the weight of 2 years of survival that wouldn't just disappear because the bad guy went to prison. "I'm fine," she said. David gave her a look that said he didn't believe her but wasn't going to push. "Okay, but for what it's worth, you've earned the right to not be fine for a while. No one's going to think less of you for being human." After he left, Lena sat at her desk and stared at the check contract until the letters blurred into incomprehensible shapes. Maybe David was right. Maybe she was allowed to not be fine. The thought was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. That weekend, Lena did something she hadn't done in 2 years. Took a full day off with no obligations. Didn't visit the hospital because Danny was having a good day and told her to stop hovering. Didn't work because David had literally taken her laptop and locked it in his office. Just existed in her apartment with nothing to do but be alone with herself. It was awful. By noon, she was climbing the walls. By 2 p.m., she'd cleaned the entire apartment, including scrubbing the crime scene ceiling stain with bleach that probably took a layer of paint off. By 4 p.m., she was seriously considering going to the office just to have something to do. Instead, she called Marcus. "I don't know how to relax," she said when he picked up. "Is this a philosophical question or a practical one?" "Both, neither. I have a whole day off and I'm losing my mind." Marcus laughed. "You're the only person I know who treats free time like a punishment. Come to my place. I'm testing recipes for my final project. You can be my guinea pig." His apartment was small but warm, decorated with the kind of care that came from actually having time to care about aesthetics. The kitchen smelled like garlic and something baking that made Lena's mouth water. "Sit," Marcus ordered, pointing at a bar stool. "Don't help, just eat and tell me if it's good." He fed her 4 different dishes. Some kind of seafood thing with saffron, a salad that tasted better than salad had any right to, fresh bread with compound butter, and a chocolate dessert that she would have sold her soul for. "This is incredible," she said around a mouthful of chocolate. "You're going to be amazing at this." "That's the plan. Stop talking and keep eating." They spent the afternoon like that. Marcus cooking, Lena eating and offering feedback, both of them avoiding heavy topics and just existing in the moment. It was the most relaxed she'd felt in months. "You needed this," Marcus said eventually, "to just stop for a minute. Remember you're a person and not just a collection of responsibilities." Is it that obvious? "Lena, you've been running on fumes since your mom died. Working yourself half to death, sacrificing everything for Danny, swallowing your pride at that garbage restaurant. And now you have this great job and the trial's over and Danny's getting better, and you still can't stop running because you don't know how. He wasn't wrong. Lena had spent so long in survival mode that she'd forgotten what came after survival. How to live instead of just endure. I don't know how to do this, she admitted quietly. How to be okay when everything's finally okay? It feels wrong somehow. That's trauma talking. Your brain got so used to crisis that normal feels dangerous. Marcus paused. But you'll learn. Give it time. Let yourself be okay without waiting for the next disaster. Easier said than done. But Lena wanted to try. On her way home that evening, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Miss Hart? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. Yes? This is Officer Bradford with the Chicago Police Department. I'm calling about the Victor Hahn case. His sentencing is scheduled for next month, and the DA's office wanted to know if you'd like to give a victim impact statement. Victim impact statement. A chance to tell the court how Victor's actions had affected her, to have her voice heard in his sentencing. Can I think about it? Of course. You have 3 weeks to decide. I'll email you the information. After he hung up, Lena stood on the sidewalk outside her apartment building and watched Chicago move around her. People heading home from work, from dinner, from whatever normal Friday activities filled their lives. People who probably weren't struggling with whether to give victim impact statements or how to process the aftermath of trials. She envied them. Their uncomplicated lives. Their ability to exist without everything being weighted with meaning and consequence. But she also didn't want to trade places. Because for all the struggle and complication and weight, she'd survived, had rebuilt, had proven to herself and everyone else that she was more than just someone to be pitied or dismissed. She went inside, climbed the stairs to her apartment, and made a decision. She'd give the victim impact statement, not because she needed to prove anything to Victor or the court or anyone else, but because staying silent had cost her too much already, and she was done making herself smaller for other people's comfort. It was time to be seen. Fully, honestly, without apology. Whatever came next, she'd face it as herself. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and broken promises. Lena sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 4B, her palms sweating against the manila folder in her lap. 3 weeks had passed since that night at Meridian, and the world had moved with a velocity that left her dizzy. Danny's transfer to Northwestern Memorial had happened within 48 hours. The oncology team there didn't just treat him. They studied him, consulted on him, brought in specialists from Boston and Houston. His new doctor, a woman named Dr. Reeves with kind eyes and zero tolerance for bureaucratic nonsense, had pulled Lena aside on day 2. Your brother's case is complex but treatable. We're looking at an aggressive protocol, combination chemotherapy, possible stem cell transplant down the line. It's going to be rough on him, but his odds are good, really good. Lena had cried in the hospital bathroom for 20 minutes after that conversation. The job at Park Industries had started the following Monday, exactly as Mr. Park promised. She'd shown up at 9 a.m. to a glass tower in the Loop, been escorted to the 43rd floor, and spent her first day signing paperwork that made her head spin. Employment contract. Non-disclosure agreements. Benefits enrollment that included health insurance so comprehensive it covered things she didn't know insurance could cover. Her official title was Cultural Linguistics Consultant. Her actual job seemed to involve sitting in meetings where executives discussed international expansion and occasionally asking her opinion on translation nuances or cultural considerations. The salary was $127,000 a year. She'd stared at that number on the contract for a full minute, certain there'd been a decimal point error. "It's correct," Mr. Park's assistant had said gently, "plus performance bonuses." The first week had been surreal. The second week had been terrifying. By the third week, Lena had started to believe it might actually be real. But today was about Victor Hahn. "Miss Hart?" A young woman in a suit, one of the prosecutors, approached with a tablet in hand. "We're ready for you. Just to review, you'll be testifying about what you heard the night of the incident. Be honest, be clear, don't elaborate beyond what you're asked. The defense is going to try to rattle you. Don't let them." Lena nodded. Her throat felt like sandpaper. The courtroom was smaller than she'd expected. Victor sat at the defense table with 2 lawyers who probably cost more per hour than she used to make in a week. He'd lost weight. His suit was still expensive but hung differently now, like he'd shrunk inside it. When his eyes found hers, there was nothing in them but cold hatred. She looked away first, hated herself a little for it. The prosecution built their case methodically. Security footage showed Victor planting the watch. Mr. Park's recording, deemed admissible after considerable legal wrangling, played in the silent courtroom. Victor's voice, arrogant and certain, confessing to crimes he'd assumed no one could understand. When it was Lena's turn, she walked to the witness stand on legs that felt borrowed from someone else. The prosecutor was a woman named Janet Reese, mid-40s, with the bearing of someone who'd fought too many battles to waste energy on the small ones. Miss Hart, can you tell the court about your linguistic background? Lena's voice came out steadier than she felt. I have a master's degree in linguistics from Northwestern University. I speak 7 languages fluently, including Korean, which I studied for 4 years and used extensively during a research semester in South Korea. And on the night of March 8th, you were working as a server at Meridian Restaurant? Yes. Did the defendant speak to you that evening? In English, yes. Brief exchanges about menu items and orders. Did he speak in any other languages in your presence? He spoke Korean throughout the meal, to his companions. They appeared to believe I couldn't understand them. Victor's lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Dennison, objected. Speculation about what the defendant believed. Sustained, the judge said. Miss Hart, stick to what you heard, not what you think people believed. Well, Janet Reese nodded. What did you hear the defendant say in Korean? Lena took a breath. He made several derogatory comments about me personally. Called me stupid, suggested I hadn't attended college, compared me to a monkey he was training. He also discussed business dealings, specifically mentioned bribing an FDA contact, transferring documents to a Cayman Islands account, and illegal approval processes for what sounded like pharmaceutical products. Did you respond to any of these statements at the time? No. Why not? Lena's hands tightened on the armrest. Because I needed the job. Because revealing I spoke Korean would have meant admitting I'd heard private conversations. Because men like Victor Hahn have lawyers and power, and I had a brother dying of leukemia and rent I couldn't pay. Because staying silent was safer. The courtroom was very quiet. But you're not staying silent now, Janet said. No, I'm not. The cross-examination was worse. Dennison came at her with the kind of polite aggression that wealthy people weaponized. Miss Hart, isn't it true that you were fired from your position at Northwestern University? I wasn't fired. I left to care for family members. But your fellowship was terminated? I withdrew from the program. After multiple absences and missed deadlines? Her jaw tightened. My mother was dying. My brother was diagnosed with cancer. I had other priorities. So you were under considerable financial stress? Yes. Desperate even? I was managing. Managing by taking a job well below your education level? By working 60-hour weeks? By accumulating substantial debt? Janet objected. Relevance? I'm establishing the witness's state of mind and potential motivations, Dennison said smoothly. Overruled. Answer the question, Miss Hart. Lena met Dennison's eyes. Yes, I was desperate. Desperate enough to let your client insult me in a language he thought I couldn't speak. Desperate enough to swallow my pride every single night, but not desperate enough to lie under oath. Yet you claim my client, a respected businessman, planted evidence on you and confessed to federal crimes in a crowded restaurant. I don't claim it. Security footage proves the first part. Audio recording proves the second. Audio recording obtained without consent, I might add, by a third party who witnessed the entire interaction. Mr. Park recorded what he heard in a public space. That's not illegal. Dennison's smile was thin. You've certainly become well-versed in legal matters quickly, almost as if someone coached you. Objection! Janet was on her feet. The judge sustained it, but the damage was done. Dennison spent another 20 minutes trying to paint Lena as an opportunist, a bitter former academic looking for a payday, someone with everything to gain from destroying Victor Hahn's reputation. By the time she stepped down, Lena felt hollowed out, used up. Mr. Park was waiting in the hallway outside. He'd testified earlier, his presence in the courtroom adding weight the prosecution desperately needed. You did well, he said. I felt like I was on trial. In a way you were. The defense's entire strategy is to make you seem unreliable, biased, motivated by revenge or money. He paused. But the jury heard you. They saw the footage. They heard the recording. The truth is louder than Dennison's implications. Lena leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. What happens if he wins? If they don't convict? Then we've still exposed him. The FDA is already investigating. His business partners are distancing themselves. Sometimes justice doesn't require a conviction to function. Mr. Park's expression softened. But I don't think he'll win. I've seen enough trials to recognize when the defense is drowning. The trial lasted another week. Witnesses testified to Victor's character, or lack thereof. Financial experts explained the offshore accounts. An FDA investigator detailed the ongoing probe into bribery allegations. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on 14 counts: fraud, attempted theft by deception, perjury, conspiracy to commit bribery, money laundering, and several others that Lena only half understood. She wasn't in the courtroom when the verdict came down. She was at Northwestern Memorial, sitting beside Danny's bed while he slept, his small hand wrapped in hers. The text came from Janet Reese. Guilty. All counts. You can breathe now. Lena did breathe. A long, shaking exhale that felt like releasing 2 years of held tension. Danny stirred, his eyes opening slowly. He looked better than he had in months. The new treatment protocol was working. His color was better, his energy improving. Hey, superstar, Lena said softly. How you feeling? Tired, but okay. He squinted at her. You look weird. Good weird. Did something happen? She smiled. Yeah, something happened. The bad guy lost. Like a movie? Sort of. Real life's messier, but same basic idea. Danny considered this with the gravity of a 12-year-old philosopher. Are you the hero? The question caught her off guard. I don't know. Maybe I'm just someone who stopped letting people treat me like I was invisible. That sounds like hero stuff to me. She squeezed his hand. Get some sleep. I'll be here when you wake up. But she wouldn't be, not always, because the next morning, Mr. Park called her into his office with an offer that would change everything again. The office occupied an entire corner of the 43rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan. The furniture was minimalist, expensive, deliberate. Mr. Park sat behind a desk that probably cost more than a car, but his expression was the same one he'd worn that night at Meridian, calm, assessing, kind. Sit, please. Lena sat. 3 months into this job, and she still felt like an imposter every time she entered this building. The trial's over, Mr. Park said. Victor Hahn is going to prison. His assets are frozen, his business partnerships dissolved. In a few years, no one will remember his name. Good. I wanted to discuss your future here. You've been working primarily on document translation and cultural consultation. Basic work, honestly. Well below your capability. Lena's stomach tightened. Here it came. The real reason for this meeting. The part where he explained she hadn't been worth the investment after all. I have a different position in mind, Mr. Park continued. We're opening a new division focused on international expansion in Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. It requires someone who can navigate linguistic complexity, cultural nuance, and high-stakes negotiation. Someone who can sit across from government ministers and business leaders and command respect.
Dan
Mastarasi. He slid a folder across the desk. The position is based here in Chicago, but requires about 40% travel. The salary is $240,000 base, plus performance bonuses that could double that. Full benefits extend to immediate family, which means your brother remains covered regardless of treatment duration. Lena opened the folder with numb fingers. The job description read like something written for a person she used to be, before the collapse, before survival became her only goal. Why me? The question came out barely above a whisper. Because you're brilliant, because you're resilient, because you've demonstrated grace under pressure that most people never develop. Mr. Park leaned forward. And because you understand what it means to be underestimated. That's valuable. People will assume you're just a translator, just support staff, just background. They'll speak freely around you. They'll reveal things they shouldn't, and you'll hear everything. It was true. She'd already seen it happen in her 3 months here. Executives who assumed she was just taking notes. Clients who spoke in their native languages during negotiations, not realizing she understood every word. She'd become invisible again, but this time by choice, this time with purpose. "There's something else," Mr. Park said. "I'm not offering you this position because I feel sorry for you or because I want to save you. I'm offering it because it serves my company's interests. You'll be expected to perform, to deliver results, to earn every dollar of that salary. This isn't charity. I understand." "Do you?" "Because I need to know you're ready for this. Ready to stop thinking of yourself as someone who barely survived and start thinking of yourself as someone capable of thriving." Lena looked out the window at Lake Michigan stretching toward the horizon. From here, the city looked clean and orderly. Beautiful, even. Nothing like the view from her crappy apartment where she could see the alley dumpsters and the bus stop where she used to wait in the freezing cold after double shifts. She thought about the courthouse, about Victor's face when the verdict came down, about Janet Reese telling her she could breathe now. She thought about Danny, getting better, laughing again, planning for a future he'd been too sick to imagine a few months ago. She thought about the woman she'd been at Northwestern, confident, ambitious, certain of her worth. And she thought about the woman she'd become at Meridian, silent, invisible, swallowing humiliation because survival required it. Both women were real. Both had been necessary. But maybe it was time to become someone new, someone who combined the best parts of both and left the worst behind. "I'm ready," Lena said. Mr. Park smiled. "Good. You start Monday. We'll begin with the Singapore expansion project. Government contracts, multinational negotiations. You'll be working directly with the executive team. Mondays in 3 days. Is that a problem?" "No." She stood up, folder in hand. "No, it's not a problem." She made it to the elevator before the shaking started, leaned against the mirrored wall and watched her reflection fracture across the polished surface. The same tired face she'd seen in Meridian's bathroom. But different now, less afraid, less certain she deserved to be small. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Coffee? I need to hear everything about the trial, and I have news." They met at a cafe near Northwestern Memorial. Marcus had left Meridian 2 weeks after the incident. Couldn't stomach working there anymore, he'd said. He'd found a job at a smaller restaurant with better pay and management that didn't throw employees under the bus. "You look different," he said when she slid into the booth across from him. "Different how?" "I don't know. Less like you're waiting for something bad to happen." She smiled. "Maybe I'm just tired of waiting." "So the verdict? Guilty. All counts." Marcus let out a low whistle. "How long?" "Sentencing is next month, but the prosecution's pushing for 15 years minimum." "Good. He deserves worse." Marcus stirred his coffee absently. "You hear what happened to Gerald?" "The manager?" "Yeah, turns out when Mr. Park fired him, word got around. No restaurant in Chicago will touch him now. Last I heard, he's working at some chain place in the suburbs, making maybe half what he used to." Lena should have felt satisfaction at that, should have enjoyed the karmic justice. Instead, she just felt tired. "What's your news?" she asked, changing the subject. Marcus's face lit up. "I got into culinary school. Real one, too. Le Cordon Bleu's Chicago campus, start in the fall." "Marcus, that's incredible. Right? I mean, it's expensive as hell, but I've been saving, and I got a partial scholarship, and..." He stopped, grinning. "I'm actually going to do something with my life instead of just carrying other people's food around." They talked for another hour, about dreams deferred and second chances. About how strange it felt when life suddenly decided to stop kicking you and started offering possibilities instead. When Lena got back to the hospital, Danny was awake and arguing with his nurse about his dinner options. "They're trying to make me eat vegetables," he complained when Lena walked in. "It's a human rights violation." "Eat the vegetables," Lena said, but she was smiling. The nurse, a woman named Patricia who took exactly zero nonsense from 12-year-olds, raised an eyebrow. "Listen to your sister. She's smart." After Patricia left, Danny picked at his dinner with theatrical reluctance. "Doctor, Reeves says I might get to go home soon. Like, actually home, not just for visits." Lena's breath caught. "She said that?" "Said if the next round of tests look good, I could do outpatient treatment. Still have to come back for appointments and stuff, but I could sleep in my own bed." He looked up at her. "We still have the apartment, right? You didn't give it up?" We still have it. Barely. She'd been keeping it as a backup, paying rent from her new salary while living in hospital chairs and sleeping in the on-call room that Patricia let her use. But I was thinking maybe we could find something better. Somewhere with actual heat in the winter. Maybe 2 bedrooms so you don't have to sleep on the couch. Danny's eyes went wide. Are we rich now? No, but we're not desperate anymore. There's a difference. Cool. He considered this while chewing a particularly offensive piece of broccoli. Can we get a dog? Let's start with getting you healthy. Then we'll talk about dogs. That's not a no. That's not a yes either. He grinned, the same grin he'd had before he got sick, when the world was still simple and fair, and went back to his dinner. Lena sat in the chair beside his bed and let herself feel it. Not happiness, exactly. Not yet. But something close. Something that felt like the opposite of drowning. Her phone buzzed. An email from the Singapore project team leader, asking if she could join a call tomorrow to discuss preliminary negotiations. She typed back a response. I'll be there. 3 months ago, she'd been invisible. Silent. Smaller than she needed to be because the world required it. Now she was about to walk into international negotiations with government ministers and corporate executives. She was about to use every language in her head, every skill she'd buried, every piece of the person she used to be. And maybe, she was about to prove that sometimes the people who survive the worst are the ones who end up changing the most. Danny fell asleep with the TV on. Some cartoon about kids with superpowers saving the world. Lena turned the volume down but left it playing, the colors flickering across his sleeping face. She thought about Victor Hahn in a prison cell, about Mr. Park giving her a chance she didn't ask for, about Marcus in culinary school, about Dr. Reeves and her kind eyes and her refusal to accept anything less than Danny's complete recovery. She thought about all the invisible people in the world, the ones who kept their heads down and their mouths shut because speaking up was dangerous, the ones who knew things they weren't supposed to know and saw things they weren't supposed to see. She'd been one of them. Maybe, in some ways, she still was. But now she had a choice about it. Now invisibility was a tool, not a prison. The night shift nurse poked her head in. You staying again? If that's okay. Chair or on-call room? On-call room if it's free. Thanks, Patricia. He's doing really well, you know. Dr. Reeves wasn't just being optimistic. His latest numbers are excellent. Lena's throat tightened. Yeah? Yeah. Your brother's going to be fine, and so are you. After Patricia left, Lena sat in the darkened room and let herself cry. Not the bitter tears from the Meridian bathroom. Not the desperate ones from the nights when Danny's fever spiked and the bills piled up and the future looked like nothing but darkness. These were different, cleaner. The kind of tears that happened when you realized you'd made it through something you weren't sure you'd survive. She cried for the woman she'd been, brilliant and broken and barely holding on. She cried for the woman she'd had to become, silent and invisible and stronger than she knew. And she cried for the woman she was becoming, someone who'd learned that survival was just the first step and that the real work was figuring out how to live once the surviving was done. Outside the hospital window, Chicago glittered in the darkness. Somewhere in that city, Victor Hahn was beginning to understand what justice felt like. Somewhere else, Mr. Park was probably still in his office, building empires and paying forward chances he'd been given decades ago. And here, in room 4127 of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Lena Hart sat beside her sleeping brother and made a promise to herself. She would never be invisible again unless she chose to be. She would never silence herself unless strategy required it. She would never forget what it felt like to be powerless, even as she claimed power for herself. Because the best weapon against cruelty wasn't cruelty in return. It was becoming so undeniably excellent that silence became a choice instead of a necessity. She pulled out her phone and opened the Singapore project files. Started reading, started preparing, started becoming the person she'd always had the potential to be. Monday was 3 days away. She had work to do. The conference room in Singapore's Marina Bay Financial Center had windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a view of the harbor that probably cost more per square foot than most people's homes. Lena sat at a table designed to seat 20, surrounded by men in expensive suits who spoke 4 different languages and shared one common assumption. She was just there to translate. They were wrong, but she didn't correct them. Not yet. 6 months had passed since the trial, since Danny's first clear test results, since she'd walked into Mr. Park's office and accepted a job that terrified her. Half a year of learning to be someone new while dragging pieces of who she'd been along for the ride. The Singapore project was her first major assignment, a joint venture between Park Industries and the Singaporean government to develop sustainable housing infrastructure. Hundreds of millions in contracts, political stakes that could topple careers, and negotiations conducted in a mixture of English, Mandarin, Korean, and Malay that shifted depending on who was trying to gain advantage. Lena understood every word, every nuance, every intentional mistranslation that the official interpreters let slide. Miss Hart, could you clarify the minister's statement about the zoning requirements? David Chen, Park Industries' lead negotiator, looked at her expectantly. He was good at his job but spoke exactly one language fluently. The Singaporean minister, a sharp-eyed man named Prakash, who'd been in government longer than Lena had been alive, had just finished explaining in Malay that the zoning requirements were negotiable pending appropriate considerations. The official interpreter had translated it as pending review. The difference mattered a lot. Minister Prakash indicated the requirements could be adjusted if certain considerations are addressed, Lena said carefully. He's suggesting flexibility in exchange for something specific. Prakash's eyes flickered toward her. A hint of surprise, quickly masked. David nodded, missing the subtext entirely. What kind of considerations? That, Lena said, is what we need to discuss, preferably in Mandarin, since the minister seems more comfortable in that language for detailed negotiations. She said this last part in Mandarin, directing it at Prakash, who'd been educated in Beijing before returning to Singapore. His eyebrows rose slightly. Your Mandarin is excellent, he said in that language. Better than my staff led me to believe. I find people often underestimate what I understand, Lena replied. It can be useful. Something shifted in Prakash's expression, a recalibration. The meeting continued, but now he addressed many of his comments directly to her, bypassing the official interpreters who were suddenly looking nervous about their job security. By the end of the 3-hour session, they'd made more progress than the previous 2 weeks combined. David was thrilled. The Park Industries team was impressed, and Prakash had invited Lena to a private dinner to discuss cultural considerations before the next round of negotiations. That was incredible, David said as they left the building. The Singapore heat hit like a wall after the air-conditioned conference room. How did you know about the Malay thing? The interpreters completely missed that. I speak Malay. They translated what he said, not what he meant. There's a difference? Always. Especially in negotiations where saying something directly would be considered rude. David shook his head, grinning. Mr. Park knew what he was doing when he hired you. I thought... He stopped himself. You thought what? Nothing. Doesn't matter. But Lena knew what he'd been about to say. He'd thought she was a diversity hire, a token, someone Mr. Park brought on board to feel good about himself. She'd heard the whispers in the Chicago office those first few months, seen the sideways looks, the assumptions. She didn't blame them. She'd assumed the same thing. It's fine, she said. People think what they think. Results change minds faster than explanations. That night, Lena sat alone in her hotel room, a suite on the 40th floor that she still wasn't quite comfortable occupying, and video called Danny. His face filled the screen, healthier than she'd seen it in years. He was back in school now, living in the new apartment they'd moved into 3 months ago. 2 bedrooms, functioning heat, a building where the elevator actually worked. Mrs. Chen from downstairs checked on him when Lena traveled, which was becoming more frequent. How's Singapore? Danny asked. He was eating cereal directly from the box, which meant Mrs. Chen had already gone home for the night. Hot, crowded. The meeting went well. Did you do the thing? What thing? The thing where you pretend you don't understand and then surprise everyone by being smarter than them. Lena laughed. I don't pretend. I just don't volunteer information until it's useful. That's pretending. It's strategy. Whatever. Mrs. Chen made dumplings. She left some in the fridge for when you get back. Tell her thank you. Tell her yourself. You'll be home in like 3 days. He paused, then asked more quietly, You are coming back in 3 days, right? The question hurt more than it should have. Yes, 3 days, promise. After they hung up, Lena sat on the edge of the bed and let the guilt settle in her chest like a familiar weight. She was traveling 40% of the time now, sometimes more. Danny was doing well, thriving even, but he was still 12. Still needed her. Still woke up sometimes from nightmares about hospitals and needles and the smell of disinfectant. She was building a career. He was building a life without cancer. Both things were necessary. Both things were good. So why did success still feel like she was abandoning something important? The dinner with Minister Prakash was at a private club overlooking the Singapore River. Small tables, quiet conversations, the kind of place where real business happened away from official channels and recording devices. Prakash arrived alone, which surprised her. She'd expected staff, handlers, the usual entourage that powerful people traveled with. "I wanted to speak candidly," he said, settling into the chair across from her. Difficult to do with witnesses. "I'm a witness. You're also someone who understands the value of discretion. I saw that today. The way you translated only what needed to be translated, left out the parts that would have complicated things unnecessarily." Lena chose her words carefully. "My job is to facilitate communication, not create problems." Exactly. Prakash ordered wine, something expensive that she pretended to appreciate, and leaned back in his chair. "Your Mr. Park is fortunate to have you. Not many people can navigate the spaces between languages the way you do. Most translators are too literal, too concerned with accuracy. They miss the politics." "Translation is politics." "Yes, precisely, yes." He smiled. "You're wasted in that conference room, you know, sitting beside David Chen, feeding him information he should be able to gather himself. You should be negotiating directly." "I'm not a negotiator." "You negotiated today, more effectively than anyone else in that room." He paused. "Tell me something. Why do you let them underestimate you?" The question caught her off guard. "Excuse me?" "The Park Industries team. They think you're support staff. Highly skilled support staff, granted, but still support. You could correct that assumption." "Why don't you?" "Because being underestimated was armor. Because people revealed more when they thought you were less. Because she'd learned at Meridian that invisibility could be a weapon if you wielded it correctly." "It's useful," she said finally. "People are careless around those they don't consider threats." Prakash laughed, a genuine sound that made him seem younger. "That's a very Singaporean philosophy. We've built an entire nation on being underestimated by our neighbors. Now, look at us." They talked for 2 hours, about language and power, about the ways culture shaped negotiation, about his years in government and her abbreviated time in academia. He didn't ask why she'd left Northwestern, which meant he'd done his research and already knew. Near the end of the meal, he said something that would echo in her mind for weeks afterward. "You know what's interesting about translation? It's the only profession where invisibility is considered success. The better you are, the less anyone notices you. You disappear into the text, the conversation, the background. People forget you're even there." He met her eyes. "But that's changing, I think. At least for you, whether you want it to or not." 3 days later, Lena flew back to Chicago. She'd expected to feel relief at coming home. Instead, she felt restless, like she'd left something unfinished. Danny was at school when she arrived at the apartment. She unpacked, did laundry, tried to settle back into normal life. But normal felt increasingly like a costume she put on between trips, a role she played when she wasn't being the other version of herself. Her phone rang. "Mr. Park." "How was Singapore?" "Productive. Minister Prakash wants to move forward with Phase 2. "Good. And the cultural dinner?" "He offered me a job." The words came out before she'd planned to say them. Silence on the other end. Then, "Did he?" "Working for the Singaporean government as a senior cultural consultant. It's mostly symbolic. They want someone Western educated to interface with European and American partners. But the salary is substantial." "And you're telling me this because you gave me a chance when no one else would. Because I owe you honesty." More silence. Then Mr. Park said, "Come to the office. We should talk face to face." An hour later, Lena sat in the same chair where she'd accepted the position that changed her life. Mr. Park looked older than she remembered, or maybe she was just noticing it for the first time. Are you going to take it? He asked. I don't know. Probably not. Danny's here. His doctors are here. Moving him to Singapore would disrupt his treatment, his school, everything. But you're considering it. I'm considering what it means that I was offered it. 6 months ago, I was serving food to people who treated me like furniture. Now governments are recruiting me. Mr. Park nodded slowly. Success is disorienting, especially when it comes fast. You don't have time to adjust to each new level before the next opportunity appears. Is that what happened to you? In a way, though my circumstances were different. I was running from poverty and war. You're running towards something that's healthier, I think. I'm not running. Aren't you? He wasn't being cruel, just honest. You travel more than any of my other consultants. You take every difficult assignment. You volunteer for projects in countries where you don't speak the language just so you can learn it. That's ambition. That's avoidance. You're very good at your job, Lena. Exceptional even. But you're also very good at staying too busy to deal with the parts of your life that aren't work. The observation stung because it was true. Danny's healthy now, Mr. Park continued. The cancer is in remission. You've paid off your debts. You have financial security, professional success. So what are you still running from? Lena looked out the window at Lake Michigan. I don't know how to stop being the person who has to prove she deserves to exist. Ah, Mr. Park's expression softened. That's harder to shake than poverty. Poverty ends when you get money, but the belief that you're only valuable if you're useful, that stays, becomes part of how you see yourself. How did you get past it? I'm 73 years old and still working 60-hour weeks. What makes you think I got past it? They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, Chicago carried on with its business, indifferent to personal revelations happening on the 43rd floor. Don't take the Singapore job, Mr. Park said finally. Not because I don't want to lose you, though I don't, but because you'd be taking it for the wrong reasons. You'd be running again, and eventually you have to stop and figure out what you're actually trying to build instead of just surviving. That evening, Lena picked Danny up from school. He climbed into her car with his backpack dragging and his hair sticking up in 3 different directions. Mrs. Martinez gave us homework over spring break, he announced. It's inhumane. Mrs. Martinez is preparing you for high school. I'm 12. High school's a million years away. 4 years. Like I said, million years. They stopped for pizza, Danny's favorite place, the one with arcade games in the back and grease that soaked through the box. He demolished 3 slices while telling her about some drama involving his friend Marcus, different Marcus, same name, and a science project gone wrong. So then the volcano exploded all over Mrs. Martinez's desk, and Marcus tried to blame it on Jacob, but everyone saw him add the extra vinegar, so… Danny, Lena interrupted, if I got offered a job in Singapore, would you want to move there? He stopped mid-sentence, pizza halfway to his mouth. What? A job in Singapore. We'd have to move. Like, permanently? Maybe. Probably. Danny set down the pizza. His face went serious in the way that meant he was actually thinking instead of just reacting. Is it a good job? It's a very good job. Better than the one you have now? Different, not necessarily better. Do you want to take it? The question she'd been avoiding. I don't know. Danny considered this while picking pepperoni off his pizza slice. Finally, he said, We just got the new apartment, and Mrs. Chen's dumplings are really good, and Dr. Reeves knows all my stuff. If we moved, I'd have to start over with a new doctor who doesn't know about the thing with my port or how I react to the one medication. We could transfer your records. Yeah, but it wouldn't be the same, He looked up at her. Plus, I kind of like my school now, and Marcus and I are finally in the same class, and I was going to try out for soccer in the fall. Each reason landed like a small weight. Collectively, they added up to a life. Not a perfect life, not a life she'd planned, but a real one. With roots, with people, with future tense instead of just survival, present tense. Okay, Lena said. Okay? Okay, we're staying. Danny's relief was visible. So you're turning down the Singapore job? Yeah. Even though it's really good? Even though some things are more important than good jobs. He grinned and went back to his pizza. Crisis averted. Decision made. As simple as that for him. For Lena, it felt like closing a door she hadn't realized she'd been holding open. Not a bad feeling, just final. The next morning, she called Minister Prakash and declined his offer. He took it graciously, said the door remained open, mentioned she should visit Singapore again sometime. Professional courtesy wrapped around genuine disappointment. Then she called Mr. Park and told him she was staying. Good, he said simply. I'll have HR draw up a revised contract. Same position, but I'm adding director to your title. You've earned it. You don't have to. Lena, learn to accept good things when they're offered. It's a skill you need to develop. Over the next few months, life settled into something resembling normalcy. Danny continued to thrive. His hair grew back fully. His energy returned. He made the soccer team in the fall and was terrible at it, but loved it anyway. Lena traveled less. By choice, not necessity. She turned down assignments that would take her away for more than a week, started mentoring younger consultants at Park Industries, began teaching a night class on business linguistics at a community college because she missed academia, and it turned out you could return to things you'd left behind, just in different forms. Marcus, her Marcus, not Danny's, graduated from culinary school and opened a pop-up restaurant in Logan Square. Lena went to the opening night, watched him command a kitchen with the same competence he'd once used to navigate Meridian's dining room, and felt genuinely happy for someone else's success without comparing it to her own. 1 year after the trial, she got a letter from Victor Hahn's lawyers. He was filing an appeal, they said. New evidence, procedural errors, the usual desperate grasping of someone facing 14 years in federal prison. The appeal went nowhere. The conviction stood. Lena felt nothing when she heard. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a vague sense that justice had happened and now it was over, and she could stop thinking about that night at Meridian like it defined her entire existence. 2 years after the trial, on a random Tuesday in March, Lena stood in front of a room full of international business leaders at a United Nations Economic Summit in Geneva. She was there to present on linguistic barriers in global trade negotiations. Her research, her findings, her name on the program. The presentation went well. Afterward, people approached with questions, with job offers, with academic positions at universities that had rejected her graduate school applications years ago. She turned most of them down, not because they weren't good opportunities, but because she'd learned something important. There would always be another job, another offer, another chance to prove herself. The trick was knowing when you'd already proven enough. That night, alone in her hotel room overlooking Lake Geneva, Lena video called Danny. He was 14 now, taller, his voice cracking at random intervals. He'd discovered video games and was in the middle of explaining some complicated strategy that she didn't fully understand but pretended to follow. Anyway, how's Switzerland? He asked eventually. Beautiful. Cold. The presentation went well. Did you do the thing? She smiled. What thing? The thing where you're smarter than everyone expects, and then they realize they underestimated you? I'm not sure that's a thing anymore. People expect me to be smart now. It's less dramatic. Boring? Maybe, but easier. After they hung up, Lena stood at the window and looked out at the lights reflecting off the lake. She thought about the woman who'd stood in Meridian's bathroom 2 years ago, crying over insults she couldn't respond to. The woman who'd made herself invisible because survival required it. That woman felt like someone from another life, someone she used to be but wasn't anymore. The change hadn't been sudden or dramatic. There'd been no single moment of transformation, just 1,000 small choices to stop shrinking, to stop apologizing for taking up space, to stop treating her own intelligence like something to hide. She'd learned that silence could be power, but so could speaking. That being underestimated was useful, but being recognized was better. That survival was necessary, but thriving was the point. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Park. Congratulations on Geneva. Proud of you. Simple words. But they mattered. 3 years after the trial, Lena sat in a different courtroom. Not as a witness this time. As an expert consultant in a case involving translation fraud in international contracts. The lawyers deferred to her opinions. The judge asked her to clarify technical points. She was paid $500 an hour for her time. Victor Hahn's name came up once, tangentially, as a cautionary tale about assuming linguistic privacy in public spaces. "Whatever happened to him?" one of the lawyers asked during a break. "Still in prison," Lena said. "Eligible for parole in 7 years." "Does he know you're doing this? Expert witness work?" "I have no idea. We don't exactly keep in touch." The lawyer laughed. "Thought it was a joke." It wasn't. Lena genuinely didn't think about Victor Hahn anymore. He'd been a catalyst, not a defining moment. The thing that pushed her to change, but not the reason she'd changed. That distinction mattered. 4 years after the trial, Danny graduated from high school. Not at the top of his class, not with any particular honors, but alive and healthy and planning for college. Like cancer was something that had happened to someone else a long time ago. Lena cried at his graduation. So did Mrs. Chen, who'd become like family. So did Marcus, who'd closed his restaurant but was already planning the next one. So did Dr. Reeves, who'd come as a guest and who still kept tabs on Danny's health, even though he'd aged out of pediatric oncology. At the graduation party, held in their apartment, which felt too small for the number of people who'd shown up, Danny pulled Lena aside. "I want to study linguistics," he said. "What?" "In college. I want to study languages, like you did." Danny, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. You made languages seem like superpowers when I was a kid. Like you could understand secret codes that other people couldn't hear. I want to do that." Lena's throat tightened. "Languages are hard. The career prospects aren't great. You could study something more practical." "You sound like a guidance counselor." "I sound like someone who knows how hard it is." "Yeah, but you also love it. I can tell. Even when you're translating boring contract stuff, you get this look on your face when someone uses an interesting phrase or switches languages mid-sentence. You light up." She hadn't realized he'd noticed, hadn't realized he'd been paying that much attention. "Okay," she said. "Study linguistics, but minor in something practical, business or computer science or something you can fall back on." Deal. That fall, Danny started at Northwestern. Full scholarship, academic and need-based. He called Lena after his first linguistics class, excited and overwhelmed and already planning his study abroad semester. 5 years after the trial, Lena published a book, The Politics of Translation, Power, Language, and the Spaces Between. It was academic, dense, probably read by fewer than 1,000 people, but it mattered to her, proved something she'd needed to prove to herself. The book's dedication read, "For Danny, who reminded me that speaking up is always worth it, and for everyone who's ever had to stay silent when they wanted to scream." Mr. Park bought 20 copies and distributed them to his executive team with a note that said, "Read this. Then remember that the quiet people in the room are often the smartest ones." 6 years after the trial, Lena got a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Miss Hart?" The voice was unfamiliar, male, young. "Yes?" "My name is James Hahn. I'm Victor Hahn's son." Lena's stomach dropped. "How did you get this number?" "It wasn't hard. You're published now, public figure." He paused. "I'm not calling to threaten you or anything. I just wanted to say something." "I'm listening." "My father is a terrible person. I didn't fully understand that until the trial, until I was old enough to process what he'd done." Another pause. "I'm in college now. Studying ethics, actually, trying to figure out how to be different than him. And I realized I should probably apologize to you for what he did, for who he was." "You don't have to apologize for your father." "I know, but I wanted to anyway. You didn't deserve what he did to you, and you handled it with more grace than most people would have." After they hung up, Lena sat with the phone in her hand for a long time, processing. She'd never thought about Victor Hahn having a family, having a son who'd have to live with his father's choices, having people who'd been collateral damage to his cruelty. 7 years after the trial, Lena was offered a position at Northwestern's linguistics department, associate professor. Research focus. Teaching load she could manage, the kind of position she'd dreamed about before everything fell apart. She accepted. On her first day back on campus, she walked past the building where she'd defended her thesis, past the office where Dr. Hart had told her they couldn't hold her fellowship, past all the places where her old life had existed. It felt like coming full circle, but also not, because she wasn't the same person who'd left, wasn't even trying to be. She was someone new, someone who'd learned that breaking wasn't the same as being broken, that survival was just the beginning, that the spaces between languages were where real communication happened, and the spaces between who you were and who you became were where real transformation lived. 8 years after the trial, on a cold night in March, Lena stood outside Meridian. The restaurant had changed owners, been remodeled, was now some trendy fusion place with a waiting list. She didn't go inside, just stood on the sidewalk and remembered the woman who'd worked there, who'd swallowed insults, who'd made herself invisible. That woman had been brave in ways Lena was only now beginning to understand. Brave enough to survive. Brave enough to stay silent when speaking would have cost everything. Brave enough to wait for the right moment to be seen. "You good?" A voice beside her. Danny, 20 years old now, home for spring break. "Yeah, just thinking." "About the restaurant?" "About everything." They walked back toward the parking garage. Chicago was cold and dirty and beautiful in the way cities are when you've built a life in them, despite all the reasons to leave. "You ever regret it?" Danny asked. "Staying here instead of taking one of those fancy international jobs?" "Sometimes, not often." "I'm glad you stayed." "Me too." It was true. She'd built something here, not just a career, not just financial security, but a life with roots and connections and people who mattered. She'd learned to be visible on her own terms, learned that the opposite of invisible wasn't loud, it was authentic. The cancer had taught Danny to appreciate breathing. The restaurant had taught Lena to appreciate being seen. Both lessons had been expensive. Both had been worth it. 9 years after the trial, Victor Hahn was released on parole. Lena heard about it through a news alert on her phone. Felt nothing in particular. He'd served his time. Lived with consequences. The story was over. Or so she thought. 2 weeks later, she received a letter. Handwritten. Forwarded through her publisher. "Miss Hart, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. What I did was inexcusable. The person I am, is someone I'm trying to distance myself from, though that seems impossible given that he's me. I've had a lot of time to think. Prison does that. Forces you to sit with your worst moments until you can't run from them anymore. I've thought about that night at Meridian more times than I can count, about how casual my cruelty was, how easily I dehumanized you, how certain I was that I mattered more than you did. I was wrong. Profoundly, completely wrong. I don't know what your life looks like now, but I hope it's good. I hope you found what you were looking for, and I hope you know that your dignity that night, your refusal to sink to my level even when you had every right to, changed me. Maybe not immediately. Maybe not even consciously at first, but eventually. This isn't an attempt at redemption. I don't think I get that. But I wanted you to know that I see you now, really see you. And I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to learn how to look." Victor Hahn Lena read the letter twice, then put it in a drawer and went back to grading papers. She never responded, didn't feel the need to. The apology was his to make, not hers to accept or reject. She'd moved past needing anything from him years ago. 10 years after the trial, Lena received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Linguistic Society of America for contributions to the field of translation studies and for advocacy work supporting multilingual education. She gave a speech at the ceremony, talked about the politics of language, about who gets heard and who stays silent, about the ways power shapes communication. She didn't mention Meridian, didn't mention Victor Hahn, didn't make it a story about revenge or justice or any neat narrative arc. Instead, she talked about her students, about Danny, who was now getting his PhD in sociolinguistics, about the community college kids she still taught on weekends, who came from the same desperate circumstances she'd once inhabited. She talked about how language was power, but so was choosing when to wield it and when to hold back. How being underestimated was only useful if you eventually demanded to be seen correctly. The speech got a standing ovation. Awards were nice, recognition was nice, but neither was why she did the work. She did it because somewhere out there were people sitting in bathrooms crying over insults spoken in languages they weren't supposed to understand. People making themselves small to survive. People waiting for the moment when survival could transform into something more. And she wanted them to know that moment comes. Maybe not when you expect it, maybe not the way you imagine, but it comes. You just have to be patient enough to see it, brave enough to seize it, and stubborn enough to refuse to go back to being invisible once you've learned what it feels like to be seen. After the ceremony, Lena stood outside the venue with Danny and Mr. Park and Marcus and Dr. Reeves and Mrs. Chen and all the people who'd become her chosen family through the years of surviving and then thriving. "Not bad for a former waitress," Marcus said, grinning. "Former struggling waitress," Lena corrected. "Let's be specific about our struggles." They laughed, headed to dinner at Marcus's new restaurant, the third one, the one that was finally successful enough to sustain itself. Sat around a table talking in 4 different languages because they could, because it was fun, because language was play when you weren't fighting to survive. Later, much later, after everyone had gone home and Lena was alone in her apartment, bigger now, nicer, but still in Chicago because some things mattered more than upgrades. She thought about the question Danny had asked years ago outside Meridian. Did she regret staying? No. She'd built a life here, not a perfect one. Not a life without scars or hard moments or days when she still felt like that desperate woman serving food to people who couldn't see her. But a real life, with people who mattered, with work that fulfilled her, with proof that survival could eventually, if you were lucky and stubborn and patient, transform into something that looked like happiness. The woman who'd stood in Meridian's bathroom 10 years ago would barely recognize her now, would probably be intimidated by her, honestly. By the confidence, the success, the way she moved through the world like she had a right to take up space. But that woman would also recognize the parts that hadn't changed, the memory of what it felt like to be invisible, the understanding that some people lived entire lives in that silence, the commitment to never forget what survival cost, even after you'd moved beyond needing it. Lena looked out her window at Chicago spread below. The same city, different view. She thought about silence and language and all the ways people communicated without ever truly being heard. And she thought about the moment she'd finally spoken up at Meridian, not because it was safe, not because she'd calculated the risks, but because staying silent one more second would have cost her something more important than a job. It would have cost her herself. That was the real story. Not revenge, not justice, not even redemption. Just a woman learning that being seen was scarier than being invisible, but worth it. That speaking up would cost her, but staying silent would cost more. That the opposite of survival wasn't success. It was living fully, authentically, without apologizing for taking up space in a world that preferred she stayed small. She'd learned, she'd survived, she'd thrived. And now, finally, she could rest.